All right. Little Saturday morning cereal edition of Tougies Take. Yeah, that's right. This episode's coming to you a day late and $1 short, thanks to the NHL Draft, where we have so much news, so much to talk about. Let's hope you're on a road trip. Tougie, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. And again, we were supposed to record this yesterday, as intended. I went out for a hike, and I got the alert on my phone of, internet out in your area. And my girlfriend's mom actually works for the electric company, so I knew this ahead of time. And I'm like, I got a message to each and be like, I don't think I'm going to be able to record. And thank God we didn't, because as I was driving home, trade news broke. And then more trade news broke. And then the draft itself happened. It's a good thing we held off. And because of that, we're going to get right down to business on today's show. I had asked people on Friday morning, like, hey, viewer questions, we're going to put all those to the side for today's show. Again, Deej and I will be back likely on potentially Monday, maybe Tuesday, as originally planned. He and I have to talk about that. Real rotating schedules for us as of late. But we're going to jump right into this. Again, push the warmies aside, push the viewer questions aside, get down to the nitty-gritty. And if you want to get down to your nitty-gritty, make sure to use code Tougie at manscaped.com for 20% off your order, free worldwide shipping. And Manscaped, Deej, what could we possibly say about Manscaped that we haven't already said as we both try to pay attention to the beginning of round 2 of the NHL Draft?
Yeah, I think Manscaped, swim fast, smell great, your balls will thank. Use code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off at manscaped.com.
The Lawnmower 4.0, the Ultra Smooth package, which I just showed off to you on the video side of things.
Chase your Olympic dreams with Manscaped.
So, Deej, with that, let's start off on a bit of a high note, because there's going to be some conversation today, again, because it's a hockey podcast and we can't escape negative conversations, it appears. So the first thing I just wanted to quickly mention, and we are going to be running through topic after topic after topic today, so get ready for this breakneck pace. But Deej, it doesn't even feel like this happened this week or since our last show, which was our Seattle, our Seattle expansion preview. Which, by the way, we're going to talk about Seattle, of course. We did a live show for that, and that draft was so goddamn boring. I didn't put it out on YouTube. But
watch
earlier
two confused men.
Yeah, earlier this week, Luke Prokop, Nashville Predators prospect, came out. Again, there's a lot of negative to talk about today, but wanted to start off with a positive. The NHL also announced a $100,000 donation to national LGBTQ plus organizations selected in coordination with Luke Prokop. Again, credit to him for taking a step that unfortunately is still viewed as a step. And again, hopefully he is one of those guys that helps, really set that bridge as to where it's just not. It's funny because you use the phrase not a big deal, as big of a deal as it is, which can sound negative, but Deej, I think you know what I mean, in that for the type of person I am, I'm just like, for the love of God, can we just get to the point where there's no negative connotation whatsoever for Luke Prokop to come out, because he doesn't have to be.
This is just a footnote.
Right, like he doesn't have to be like, oh God, well, if I do this, what are my teammates going to think, and what kind of backlash am I going to get? Just let people be people, let people be happy. Fair play to Luke Prokop. On top of that, Deej, unless you have anything else to add.
No, yeah.
Okay, so we have unconfirmed moves as well that I just wanted to quickly talk about. Obviously, there's not too much discussion to be had here, hence the term unconfirmed moves. The first one, this came from Brian Hedger on Twitter, I believe the Columbus Dispatch, who said Patrik Laine has received a $7.5 million qualifying offer for next season. Real possibility he's going to sign it. So we had talked about that a lot this year, the idea of what the hell happens with Patrik Laine. But I think, as we'll discuss here, the Columbus Blue Jackets have really taken a turn for the better in the past 48 hours or so. So at this point, I would no longer be surprised to see Patrik Laine stay in CBJ, but obviously, again, we don't know that for sure yet.
Yeah. I don't know. I think what happens here is, if I'm not mistaken, this is his last year of RFA eligibility.
I think so, but I'm not entirely sure because sometimes they're like skip over years and there's some weird stuff a lot of the time.
If that's correct, though, I think they just sign him to the qualifying offer and then with the goal of flipping him at the deadline.
Could be done.
That to me makes the most sense for Columbus.
Yeah. Zach Hyman, it's pretty much all but confirmed he's going to the Edmonton Oilers. Darren Dreger just reported as we started recording here, looking like the Oilers are going to wait and sign him as a free agent on Wednesday, which means a 7-year maximum term. Toronto placed a higher value on cap savings. Edmonton would gain with the 8th year in a sign and trade. So basically, if Toronto traded him and allowed Hyman to get that 8th year on the deal, it would benefit Edmonton. So Toronto said, well, you're giving us a 6th round pick. Edmonton didn't want to budge on giving them anything. So Zach Hyman, again, pretty much all but confirmed, going to be getting that big deal from the Oilers. We'll talk more about it when the numbers are confirmed, but an interesting contract to say the least. And then, again, Deej, unless you have anything to add about Zach Hyman going to the Oilers, it's not surprising that that's where he's going.
I guess the only thing I have to add is, I guess the reason it hasn't been announced yet is Toronto and Edmonton could not come to terms, and it will not happen until free agency.
Right. And then the Sam Reinhart trade. At the end of the first round of the draft, the news came out that he has apparently, pending a trade call, been officially dealt from the Buffalo Sabres to the Florida Panthers. The word was supposed to come out at the start of round 2. We're a couple picks into round 2. And still nothing. So if the details break as we're talking here, we'll talk about it later on in the show. But right now, we still do not have the official word for what the return might be for Sam Reinhart. But the idea of the Florida Panthers picking him up, in theory, I love it for the Panthers.
Yeah, the Panthers add more to a loaded offense, and it just, my God. This team will be insane. Like our third line would be Frank Vetrano. We'll get to it when it's officially called. But our third line would be better than Seattle's first line.
And as well, I just saw this from David Pagnotta at the Fourth Period on Twitter, mentioning Christian Dvorak in Arizona's name is still out there, Tyler Johnson in Tampa, so we could easily be talking about some breaking trades here as we record this particular option, this particular show, I should say. Sorry, I read the word option as I said that. As well, a couple of signings to talk about, not necessarily in the order in which they were signed, but Mike Smith re-signed in Edmonton, $2.2 million for 2 years. Deej, he was the best goaltender on the Oilers last year. The word is that they're still maybe trying to shop Koskinen, but that's a scary situation to be in when you're relying on a near 40-year-old goaltender to still lead the way for a team who has such high expectations given who the star power is on that team. Yeah,
that's something to be said, though, too, is you're the best goalie on the Edmonton Oilers. That's not too big of an award there. And I think just if anyone can stop a puck there, you put them in net. And I think regardless of age, that's just what they're doing.
Fair enough. Barclay Goodrow has officially signed with the New York Rangers after being acquired for a 7th round pick from the Lightning. It is a 6-year contract with a $3.6 million cap hit. I like Barclay Goodrow in terms of the intangibles that you cannot put on an analytics graphic. He's fantastic in that regard. In some ways, though, on the analytics side of things, holy hell, is this a risky contract to say the least. So I like Barclay Goodrow. I do think it is a bit of an improvement that the New York Rangers have picked up for the bottom 6, which was a bit of a weakness for them, if we're being honest, on top of their defensive issues, which I think they still very much need to address in free agency. But it has the potential to be an even worse contract than it looks like it could be on paper.
Yeah, Tampa's finally under the cap. It's like after getting rid of Gord and Goodrow, they now have $700K in cap space to sign 6 players to make a roster.
And hence the Tyler Johnson still looking to get moved. Rumors Taylor Hall has re-signed with the Boston Bruins, $6 million a year for the next 4 years. Yes, I am very much ecstatic. Again, you look at the analytical side of things for Taylor Hall. 2 years ago now, big plunge in Arizona, and then half of last year in Buffalo. It's a real negative impact. Like if you're someone that looks like the J Fresh cards, it's not the prettiest of pictures, but and as well, there could be the conversation of he didn't have the best postseason, and I can't disagree with that. That said, based off of what I saw out of him at times, on top of the chemistry he had with David Krejci, and we'll see if he's going to be back with the Bruins. Just overall, I'm pretty optimistic about this signing for the Bruins. I think $6 million, you get a little bit of term out of it. It's tough to see this as a loss.
Yeah, no, to me it looks awesome. That's just, you're getting him at a discount. You're getting a player who wants to be there, a player that's played well there, and just, yeah, I mean, I don't see a downside to this unless Buffalo Taylor returns.
Fingers crossed that's not the case. And then the final new signing that we wanted to talk about here, because this news came out just before we started recording, and it's really interesting based off of one of the other trades and then signings that we are due to talk about here on the show today. But Cale Makar has re-signed with the Colorado Avalanche, 6 years worth just $9 million per. And DJ, I say that, obviously, we will talk about Seth Jones later. But after that Seth Jones re-signing, everyone's saying Cale Makar, Charlie McAvoy, they're going to make $20 million a season. So Cale Makar for just $9 million, when I think he could have commanded 10 plus. I think that's a fantastic signing as well for Colorado.
Yeah, this defense market's going to get hectic real fast for anybody trying to sign an UFA.
An UFA. We'll
Tougie
see what
Hamilton,
happens.
15 mil.
We'll see what happens as well with Landeskog now, potentially still for Colorado. Still a lot to be decided there. So those are some of the signings that happened. Our quick thoughts as well. And we'll move on to just a quick topic as well that happened this week that we haven't had a chance to discuss yet. Eric Engels reporting that Marc Bergevin stated, and don't worry, we'll be talking about that. Let's go with dickhead later on in this show as well. He said Shea Weber has several injuries: ankle, foot, knee, and thumb. There's a real chance, as we discussed, that Shea Weber's career could be over.
Yeah, it really looks that way.
Did Arizona just select Shane Doan's kid? They just drafted a guy named Josh Doan.
I just saw
it's Shane. Arizona just drafted Shane Doan's kid, 37th overall. Well then, Josh Doan. Let's see. TSN Bob McKenzie had him at 66. Craig Button had it. All right, so a second to third round guy, and indeed, Shane Doan goes. Shane Doan's kid Josh goes to the Coyotes. Interesting. We might have a couple of those moments on the show.
That'll
here.
Get him to the casino.
As Pete Blackburn just tweeted, "Hell yeah, nepotism, baby."
Yeah, they're going to come see Joshy. They're going to spend money on the wheels. Yeah, that's exactly what you want, is more money to the casino. Great pick.
I mean, it's nepotism in a way, but also it's like it's not a totally out of their pick. I don't blame the Coyotes for being like, fuck it, let's just draft Shane's kid. Back to the topic at hand, though. Again, Shea Weber his career might be done. We talked about it a little bit in the last show, but it would just absolutely suck. And then we do know for a fact that Matt Calvert has retired, someone who had a history of concussions, 10 seasons, a bit of a controversial player for some fan bases, but all in all, just a farewell to one Matt Calvert after a pretty solid NHL career. Now, Deej, I mentioned that because I wanted to segue from a farewell to a get lost nerd, as the New York Rangers are just about to buy out Tony DeAngelo's contract, which, again, won't cost them a thing. 2-year hit, neither worth $1 million. He'll become a UFA and have fun in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be what's happening, but who knows at this point?
Oh, yeah, no, he's got to, I mean... The overwhelming theme of this show is that I have no respect for Marc Bergevin today. I'll just warn everybody now. And considering he went to bring D'Angelo in once upon a time, yeah, why not bring Tony D'Angelo into Montreal? Let's go for it. So here's hoping. Imagine though, being such a douche that you've cost yourself millions upon millions upon millions of dollars.
Usually works the other way around. Like a huge douche, here's some money.
It normally does work that way. You're not wrong. So shout out to Tony D'Angelo for being just
a huge douche.
A huge douche. And the last thing we'll mention here, and again, it's the continuation of the Chicago Blackhawks story. Changes within the lawsuit, new details that are out, that are horrifying. Just to keep it short rather than getting into it, at Ben Pope CST, that's at Ben Pope CST, had a lot of the new details out there, including one of the players in the lawsuit being on the receiving end of homophobic trash talking by Blackhawks coaches and players in the aftermath. So, that's not very pretty.
I do think, though, the big takeaway here in the Blackhawks story is that we now have conflicting accounts of events. So somebody is lying at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much my takeaway from this is everything that has been said. And again, we have so much to talk about today. We could get into further detail here, but we honestly just don't have the time. Somebody is lying. And, obviously, right now, the word court of public opinion comes to mind, but it's because of the process of this. Like, it does nothing about this story right now. And especially, it's not the same thing. It's not, there is a difference between what's being alleged in Chicago and, say, what Marc Bergevin pulled last night. But
yeah, I mean, the violence involved is,
right.
I think that makes it significantly worse.
It's just very interesting from that perspective with Marc Bergevin that, here's what's being alluded towards in Chicago. And then you go through and draft a problematic player, basically confirming that you don't care about the morals. All you care about is the skill level on the ice, which does not paint a pretty picture for what your role could have been in Chicago, given that story is also seemingly heavily centered around the idea of, hey, as long as we're winning on the ice, who gives a shit? And again, right now, unless something changes, it is very, very tough for me personally to not be of the opinion of wanting to see Stan Bowman out of hockey, wanting to see Marc Bergevin out of hockey, wanting to see Kevin Cheveldayoff, Joel Quenneville. Like, I'm sorry, but it's very tough to give any of them the benefit of the doubt when the claims are still, we had no idea. As these notes continue to come out, it is unfathomable to think that people involved did not know. And the problem here as well, and again, this comes from Rick Westhead, who has been at the forefront for TSN at in covering this story, spoke to an NHL team exec today, relatively new to the hockey world, past experience in the NBA. He's shocked, or they're shocked, it doesn't say specifically, that the NHL hasn't seized control of the Blackhawks investigation, sees potential to tarnish team and league image. The exec stated there's no doubt Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, would be taking control of this if it was an NBA team. I said as much on stream last night during round one, and I've uploaded clips of that stream in terms of I gave my quick thoughts on a lot of what Deej and I are going to talk about today, and then I gave my thoughts in the aftermath of pick number 31 last night. You can check those out on YouTube. I would like to be able to support the NHL without feeling dirty. And the way they're handling this, and with what happened last night in the draft, it's becoming increasingly difficult. to not feel a bit gross by supporting this league. And I hope that by the start of next season, that inner conflict is resolved. Because I've talked about this, I talk about it in those videos. You know, it would not be the first time that I've stopped watching or financially supporting an entity because I just could not look past what I felt to be a conflict of morals between myself and what that promotion stands for. And the WWE is a big comparison. We talked about that on the Patreon bonus show a long time ago. Just some of the shit that company's done, it eventually got to the point where it's like, I can't support this anymore without feeling kind of gross. So I stopped watching. And with some of the stuff going on in the hockey world right now, particularly in the NHL, I mean, God, you even look back to the Arizona Coyotes situation as well, that Katie Strang article that Deej and I talked about earlier this season. It's becoming increasingly difficult to be an NHL fan. And you can be a hockey fan without being an NHL fan. And I hope that's a reality I'm not having to look at.
Yeah, I think, I think one of the reasons that this is a little bit different than the NBA is the NHL, the owners are a little bit more lockstep than the NBA. NBA owners are very independent. I mean, you know, you get guys like Mark Cuban. Like, there's a lot of independent voices within the NBA ownership group, where the NHL ownership group tends to be lockstep, and I think that's.
I feel like some of them, others feel more outspoken.
That's fair.
Like Jeremy Jacobs in Boston is always someone who, and rightfully so, is brought up as one of the primary owners who is always seeming to, make sure his opinion is heard, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I don't know. Just at this point, I think and I can't stress this enough, as things are tried in the court of public opinion, we still do not have any facts whatsoever. So there's nothing to go upon. And I think what's happening here is, you get lawyers for the prosecution and lawyers for the defense, and they're both just trying to manipulate the emotions of the public without any facts. And I think it's important to not let yourself be a part of it until there's actual news, because otherwise you're just being manipulated.
I don't disagree with that. That
said, I do think it's noteworthy that there's this much smoke, though. You know what I mean?
Right, and I think that's the issue. And it's still just it's a really sensitive subject where we still have a long way to go in figuring out exactly what the hell happened. But for me right now, my biggest issue is the lack of action. Like, Stan Bowman's not on administrative leave. Like, there's nothing. There have seemingly been no ramifications whatsoever, and it just doesn't feel right. But we'll move on from that topic, and let's get into discussing the Seattle expansion draft a little bit before moving on to trade season and some of the other events from round one of last night. We're going to go through the first few picks of the draft. So, Deej, as the @NotThrashers on Twitter account put it best, the best player we could get in 99 expansion draft was Yannick Tremblay. The Seattle Kraken passed on Carey Price and Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, as we both know, the full list was leaked ahead of the draft. Now that you can look back on it, again, did it ruin your enjoyment of the draft? Because it definitely had an effect for myself.
I won't say it ruined it. I just I really don't like being confused, and that's what happened there. That's got to be an all-time record in history of the NHL from a GM's hiring to calls for their firing.
It was very
zero games under his tenure. Yeah, I don't know. It was really weird because when we were live streaming it at the very end, we were like, oh, okay, we got it wrong. There will be trades announced tomorrow. And then this will all make sense. And now it's even worse. Obviously, I get that he was just filling the team with huge young dudes, but that's not a good strategy.
So we'll get into talking about the team.
That's not a good strategy, Ron.
The viewership was still good on ESPN2, apparently. But yeah, very, very disappointing. Deej and I both got, I believe, 11 players correct out of 30, which, hey, not too bad. But yeah, as Deej mentioned, the Kraken made no trades with teams prior to the expansion draft. So nothing similar to what we had seen with the Vegas Golden Knights. And Greg Wyshynski said this flat out: teams weren't willing to make, there was a quote from Ron Francis saying teams weren't willing to make the same mistakes that they did last time. Of course, the conversation was, did Ron Francis set the price too high and essentially price himself out of being able to make moves? Regardless, there really wasn't anything there, and there was only one trade in the aftermath of the expansion draft itself.
Yeah. I'm still confused. So that I guess the Drieger move was amazing. Larson move was amazing. And then just a lot of other non-amazing moves. So again, they get Chris Drieger from Florida as a free agent. They signed him to a 3-year, $3.5 million contract, which I'm a big fan of. That's not overly outrageous, a pretty good prove-it deal, not a crazy amount of term. They also signed Jamie Alexiak, who they picked up from Dallas, 5 years, $4.6 million, which I think is fantastic. And Adam Larson on a $4 million 4-year contract, which I also think is fantastic. And then they flipped Tyler Pitlick to Calgary for a 4th-round pick in 2022. Deej, before we talk about just a couple other things about who they took, what do you think about just the signings that are mentioned there? I think Larson, Alexiak, and Drieger, I think those are 3 really good moves. I think all those signings are a good deal. They're good money and they're good players. So it's not so. Yeah, this expansion draft isn't all bad, That said, I think just being baffled comes from how weak this team is on paper compared to what people thought.
Yeah. I'll also mention a little bit of breaking news here from Elliot Friedman, mentioning, not sure what else is involved here, if anything, but there's a Cam Atkinson, Jakub Voracek deal being worked on between Columbus and Philadelphia. I'll be intrigued to see if that breaks throughout the course of this podcast, because
poor Jakub.
He might be going back to Columbus.
Yeah.
And David Pagnotta just tweeted, to further that tweet, I can confirm that Cam Atkinson has been informed he has been traded to Philadelphia. So Cam Atkinson apparently no longer a member of the Blue Jackets and maybe on his way to Philly. We'll talk about that trade in full on this show if we get the details here before we move on. So, Deej, in terms of the Kraken roster then, again, just to run through it, Anaheim taking Hayden Fleury, not surprising. Or they took Hayden Fleury from Anaheim, not surprising. They took Tyler Pitlick from the Coyotes and flipped him, sure. They got Jeremy Lauzon from the Bruins, which I accurately predicted there. Really good pickup for them. It really is. I was right on Will Borgen coming over from Buffalo. They did take Mark Giordano from Calgary, which, again, in our mock draft, I thought they'd go a little bit younger, a little bit cheaper with Oliver Sheelington, but it's interesting that they decided that Giordano was worth it.
Yeah, I think he is. I think you want to give a C immediately. If you're Ron Francis, that's how he runs his teams. And I think of all the available players, he makes the best captain. And so I think that's why you pick him. And you pick so many young defensemen, you need a veteran that can still play to mentor those guys. And I think Mark Giordano is absolutely the best pick for that role.
That's fair. They took Morgan Geekie from Carolina, surprising pick. Everyone who, it was Nino Niederreiter or Jake Bean, and they went with neither. Of course, again, I was right in my estimation that I thought they would go cheap, and they did by not taking Niederreiter. Thought they'd go young. They didn't take Jake Bean, though. And, of course, we'll be talking about Jake Bean here in a little bit. Deej, one of the more shocking selections, they took John Quenneville from Chicago in one of the deals that everyone was saying, well, there has to be something There has to be some sort of, deal in the works there for them to take him. And no, they just took John Quenneville.
Yeah, that was among the most confusing picks. I mean, there's so many of these that it's hard for me to wrap my head around what was going on. Like, I don't know if it's, this is just another confusing move. And I couldn't even tell you what Ron Francis was thinking, what he was doing. Maybe he misspelled some things.
Oh, we're getting Quenneville from Chicago. Yes. Oh, wait. We're a few years late, and also he's a coach. From
Remember,
Colorado.
Ron, you hired Dave, the nice man from Philadelphia.
From Colorado, they took Jonas Donskoy. That was one that you got right. Again, I thought they'd go cheaper in my expansion, but a pretty good pick. And then another really interesting one, they took Gavin Bayreuther from Columbus for no compensation. Everyone thought Max Domi. They said, well, the injuries were concerned. They take Gavin Bayreuther from Columbus. Sure. Why not?
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. There were just a lot of these where my answer was just like, yeah, that's a player of hockey. That's a hockeyman.
That is a patented hockey man, to say the least. Again, Dallas, they took Jamie Alexiak, good move. They took Dennis Cholowski from Detroit, good move. Surprised they didn't take Stetcher. They go younger, cheaper.
Yeah, that's why I thought I thought for sure there would be a deal on the table with Detroit when they took Cholowski. Like, I mean, I don't think he's that much of a downgrade from Stetcher, but it just seems like it seems so obvious.
Again, they took Adam Larson from Edmonton, Drieger from Florida. Did you hit this one on the head? Curtis McDermott from the LA Kings, as they take some big, strong boys on that blue line.
Yeah, there just weren't a lot of options in LA. And to me, he made the most sense from a salary cap perspective. And then I got lucky putting cap together to try and make the team fit under the cap. Because, I took good players. And, and I just happened to get lucky with that one.
Fair enough. Minnesota, they took Carson Suchi. A bit surprising for some people they didn't take Kaapo Kähkönen. Again, those were one of my two. Not surprised they took Suchi. And then Montreal. They don't go for Carey Price. They go for Cale Fleury. Now, again, I'll say this. I'm surprised they didn't take Brett Kulak. With Carey Price, and again, I said the theme of this show was going to be I can't stand Marc Bergevin. I, at the very least, don't want that farce of a narrative of that the mental gymnastics and the mind games and the Bergevin masterclass worked out here, because it's very obvious Seattle was not taking players with high cap hits. So the idea of, they lied about how injured Carey was, so they didn't take him, and they're like, LOL, Carey's not hurt, Bergevin masterclass. It was very obvious Seattle was not taking him. They didn't take Tarasenko. They didn't take Domi. They didn't take Niederreiter. They didn't take all of these guys with cap hits. It was very clear the strategy was not to take someone like Carey Price.
To me, I think what makes these picks make sense is if you think of Ron Francis as your drunk uncle. And obviously he's just going in alphabetical order. He takes Hayden Fleury from Carolina. He gets to Montreal and he's like, hey, you know what I like on a team? A set of brothers. And then just goes for it. I think that's 100% his logic. I think there was no greater reason to this. And that's exactly what happened. And you can't convince me otherwise.
Oh, they took Calle Jarnkrok from Nashville. Good pick. New Jersey, another one of those, how was there no compensation? They took Nathan Bastian, who, fine, I guess.
He's a hockey man.
Nailed his next two picks, Jordan Eberle from the Islanders, Colin Blackwell from the Rangers. I like both those pickups for Seattle. And then from Ottawa, they get their third goalie. They went for Joey Decord, who just seems like a really good guy and a good locker room option, so I don't hate him as their third goalie option.
Yeah.
And then, I know there's really not much to add there.
I don't know how you take him over Kaapo Kähkönen. I got to be honest.
I don't disagree. In terms of
bad.
I get the idea of getting Carson Suchi, but Yeah, no, that's one of those ones where, yeah, how don't you take Capo Kakinen at that stage? Deej, was this the most what the hell option? They take Carson Twarynski from the Philadelphia Flyers for no compensation. And again, in terms of those big contracts, they didn't take JVR, they didn't take Voracek, they wanted to avoid the money, but they went for Carson Twarynski.
So Philadelphia here was a candy store, and they walked out with a pack of gum. That is exactly what happened here. That was the most baffling, I would say. Of all the picks, the most baffling pick was not taking one of the two big elite forwards from Philadelphia.
Fair enough.
They could have flipped one of them into Cam Atkinson.
Yeah, apparently, right? Could have gotten more back in the deal, too, because you could have retained salary. So, I mean, clearly, Ron Francis is already done. Get rid of him. They took Brandon Tanev from Pittsburgh. Go ahead.
Oh, he's cooked.
There you go.
He's a goose.
That goose is cooked. They took Brandon Tanev from Pittsburgh. Smart move. I really like that pick. They took Alex True from the Sharks, which who else were you going to take from the Sharks, I guess? So that's fine. Vince Dunn from the St. Louis Blues. Again, if you're not taking Tarasenko, he was the guy to take.
Yeah, that may have been their best pick in a weird way, because they could have easily messed that up. And I feel like Vince Dunn was one of the, like, I don't know. To me, that was their best pick. Like, I don't think he's necessarily the best player they got, but I think it's the best pick they made.
Fair. They also took Yanni Gourde from Tampa, no-brainer. And another no-brainer, Jared McCann from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bold for the Toronto Maple Leafs to make that trade and then not protect him, and they lose him.
Yeah.
So
that was. I mean, obviously, it's confusing for Kyle Dubas. I understand that he was at a point where, okay, I'm going to lose one of Kerfoot or McCann. So
because I'm protecting Justin Hall.
He's the future.
As they say in the memes, bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
It's like, well, me and Justin go out for wings every Thursday, and we can't mess up wing night. Like, that's why you don't hire young GMs.
And the final three. They took Cole Lynn from Vancouver, who was one of my two. I honestly thought they'd go for Jonah Gadjevich, who I think fits that physical theme they almost have a bit better than Cole Lynn, but I don't hate that pick. Obviously, you weren't going to take anybody worth big money from the Canucks. Deej hit this one. They did take Vitek Vanacek as their second goalie, which, again, I thought good option if you didn't take Carey Price, but I built my expansion draft around the meme of them taking Carey Price because it would have been hilarious. And then the Winnipeg Jets, they took Mason Appleton rather than Dylan DeMello.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was that big of a gap between Appleton and DeMello, and I don't know.
Just depended on if you needed a forward or a defenseman, really.
My guess is because of my theory where Ron was just going in alphabetical order, he was probably like, oh, we're short of center.
A is for Appleton.
I like Apple.
So the question is then, Deej, because obviously we know this roster is going to change a lot. Like, they have a pretty ridiculous amount of cap in here. I will get us a precise number right now. And it's just, obviously the new reality of there being another NHL team in the league is crazy. They have almost $31 million in projected cap space. They still have to sign Twarynski. Borgen, Chalowski, and Vince Dunn will get paid pretty decently. They're going to have probably $25 million in cap space in free agency, and it's got to be all spent on forwards. Like the goaltending, Driedger Vanacek, that could get you to the playoffs. A defense of Giordano, Alexiak, Larson, Suchi, Dunn, and then it could be, Fleury, Lozon, whoever. That's probably good enough to get you into the playoffs. It's just they need that extra bit of forward help, which makes you think, again, $25 million to spend and bringing in forwards if they choose. Do you think they go that direction, or do they just kind of leave it be and weaponize that cap space around the deadline and move forward? I mean, basically, how do you think they're going to play this, and are they a playoff team next season?
So the amount of cap space is admirable, right? But who are you going to sign with it? Here's what you're going to hear next week. The Seattle Kraken have signed Derek Stepan to a 2-year, $4 million deal. There you go. There's your forward help. Maybe Paul Stastny leaves Winnipeg, or he's a UFA. I don't see among the remaining UFAs, what are you going to do? Are you going to send a max contract to Gabe Landeskog? There's just not a lot of options here that are going to put this team over what I would call I don't think this is a playoff team, and I don't think there is a combination of free agents that makes this a playoff team.
Fair enough. It's tough for me to doubt it because of what we saw in Vegas, and I think in some ways this roster is comparable, if not a little bit better in some regards than what we had seen from Vegas. So who's to say? I think it comes down to how you view that Pacific division heading into this upcoming season, and obviously eventually we will have our breakdown, our season preview, but are they better than Vegas right now? Absolutely not, and probably won't be through free agency. Are they better than Vancouver?
No.
Depends on what Vancouver does, but, they certainly don't have the star power that the Canucks have and the offensive firepower that they possess. That's an interesting debate. And then you have the 3 California teams, San Jose, LA, Anaheim. The LA Kings could be fantastic this year.
Yeah, I think LA is definitely better than Seattle, in my opinion.
And then Calgary and Edmonton. Edmonton will be better.
Calgary on paper is better.
Yeah, right. But who knows what they're going to do exactly? So,
it's a very bad division, but I think it got worse.
Yeah,
I think it got worse with the addition of Seattle.
Vegas for sure. Edmonton probably, and then you have the Vancouver, LA, Calgary arguments. It is tough to see Seattle making it. I don't put it out of the realm of possibility, I'll say. But it is tough to envision them making it.
It's Yanni Gourde out for 2 weeks. Oh, there go your playoffs. It's just, that's not how you want your team to be built.
Yeah, no, if you're one Yanni Gourde injury away, what does that say?
When you put it that way, doesn't that, I think that, when I thought about it like that, because originally I was like, okay, this team could overperform. Maybe Ron knows what he was doing. Maybe he wasn't drunk. Maybe he wasn't drafting brothers on purpose. But then, when you realize that the depth here is you've got a bunch of bottom 6 forwards and Yanni Gourde. Not to say Cal Yarncroft's very good. I think Jared McCann's a number 2 center on almost any NHL team. You're just one of those guys that you have on your quote unquote top line. One of them goes down, Eberle injured, playoffs gone. There's no depth here, and that's why you want to go with the hyper skilled guys, because even if they do get injured, they can cover ground.
Right. So interesting there. We do have an interesting note as well. Official. Tony DeAngelo has cleared waivers. Goodbye, Tony. Goodbye. And as well, Aaron Portzline reporting that Atkinson Voracek is going to happen. We're just waiting to find out what other pieces might be a part of the deal. So that's pretty crazy.
Greg Wyshynski tweets, "Bonjour, Tony."
We'll move on. We do have some other trades to talk about here, so it's interesting that we're still waiting for the Reinhart deal and now apparently the Atkinson Voracek details to come out. Let's get into some of the trades that happened leading up to the draft yesterday, and we'll start off, Deej, with arguably the biggest. Seth Jones goes to the Chicago Blackhawks. It is Jones, the 32nd overall pick, which we'll talk about later, and a 2022 6th for Adam Boqvist, the 12th overall pick last night, the 44th overall pick today, and a 2022 conditional first that could be pushed back to 2023. He immediately signs an 8-year, $9.5 million extension, again getting paid more than Cale Makar. Deej, in terms, let's talk about it from both teams' perspectives, and we'll start off by what this means for the Chicago Blackhawks, as they now have 4 players taking up 45% of the team's cap between Kane, Taves, Jones, and DeBrincat. We knew this deal was coming. We said as much on the show last week. What does this mean, though, for the Chicago Blackhawks, in that you gave up a lot to get Seth Jones, and then holy backflipping Jesus, did you overpay on an extension? Like, you are really banking on there being, you called it the Great Fog of Buffalo. We might as well call it the Great Fog of Columbus. Like, that's what they're banking on, is that, well, he was on a good team and his metrics suck.
Well, so now we'll get sucked when Werenski was hurt. I think that's important.
Now we'll get him on our team. Well, so Deej, okay, there you go then. So if the signs are that his metrics took a hit when not playing well with Zach Werenski, what the fuck are you gonna do now?
You're gonna do so I didn't get a chance to mention this.
Hold on, is he gonna be great next to Calvin DeHaan or Connor Murphy?
He's going to be great next to Ryan Suter, whose uncle played for the Chicago Blackhawks when he was a kid. It's a no-brainer. He plays for the Olympic athletes from Chicago, and they end up being an elite team. That's exactly what happens here.
I mean, like, I view this as a whole hell of a lot of wishful thinking. And again, I have criticized Chicago in this episode. I am going to criticize them later on as well. And right here, for that matter, I will clarify, it is not in any way, and I'll say this to Habs fans as well, nothing I say is a personal attack on fan bases of these teams. Like, nobody can deny, Chicago Blackhawks fans, Montreal Canadiens fans are fantastic, incredibly passionate. This is not a personal attack towards anybody in that regard. This is solely focused on the team. You might, though, if you're a Hawks fan, wish that Stan Bowman was pushed away from the team, because it would have stopped him from making this move that could potentially cripple this organization.
I mean, I talked about this during the season. Chicago is a cup contender that is one defenseman short of being elite. And you have this opportunity to get Seth Jones. You are, in my opinion, I think Ryan Suter ends up a Blackhawk. He doesn't go anywhere else. So you have an opportunity to, from scratch, build an elite first pairing. I mean, Seth Jones has been elite in certain years. I don't think he's necessarily a Remora to Werenski's Shark. You know, I don't think he's necessarily feeding off Remora. I don't think he's necessarily feeding off Werenski. Like, I don't think it's Werenski like that. Like, anybody who play with Werenski is going to be elite. I just think that Seth Jones needs a certain type of defenseman to be paired with. And I think Ryan Suter is that type of defenseman. And I think that's why you grab him. You use them as a pair. You have an elite pairing. You still have Patrick Kane. You still have Alex DeBrincat. You have the return of John Taves. Like, you have, you've got Lanky Kong in net. And I think all this comes together, and Chicago is very dangerous next year.
Time will tell at the end of the day. Is the only way I can phrase this. I mean, again, we'll see if Seth Jones can live up to the reputation that he has. The analytics say one thing. It's one school of thought versus another. As the Dallas Stars, by the way, 47th overall, just picked Logan Stankoven, and I think that's a phenomenal pick for them.
Great name.
Wanted to point that out.
The trade is 1-for-1.
And indeed, I was going to mention that as well. We'll talk about that trade in a second, because one of the trades we were mentioning is now official. I want to talk about, though, what this trade meant for Columbus in terms of Seth Jones. Because, again, you're more on the side. If you think it's going to work, jury's out for me. But for the Blue Jackets, you move on from Seth Jones, which I think was very much needed. You move the 32nd overall pick, but move up to the 12th, which is great. I mean, think about this then. You move up in terms of first round picks by 20 spots. You also get a second round pick, 44th overall, which they did actually end up moving to Carolina, I do believe, to move up last night. And they also have another first round pick in either 2022 or 2023. And you added Adam Boqvist, who is a built-in replacement for Jones. I think this was a slam dunk for Jarmo Kekalainen. I love this deal for Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the draft breakdown later, but I mean, that pick Columbus got at 12th with the son of Suitcase Sillinger, a former Blue Jacket. I think that was a phenomenal pick for them.
Yeah. So we'll transition to this then. The other trade for Columbus. There were a couple, and this is the breaking news one. The deal is official. It is 1-for-1. The Columbus Blue Jackets trade Cam Atkinson to the Philadelphia Flyers for Jakub Voracek. No other pieces involved. Deej, your initial reaction to this trade?
Something's going on with Voracek, I think, is my initial reaction.
In what way?
I think Philly was very motivated to get rid of him, and I think that there must be a reason for that. That I did not see on the ice.
So he's an interesting player, and I guess we'll transition then into talking about what this means for both teams, because my initial reaction, I think, is the initial reaction that most people are going to have to this Voracek-Atkinson trade, and it's pretty much pure shock. In talking about what this means for, let's talk about Columbus first. You can't say Cam Atkinson had a phenomenal season this past year. He didn't. A lot of players in Columbus didn't. Offensively, he's still a solid, not great or elite puck mover in terms of generating offense. He's good on the PK as well. But, again, the numbers weren't the best, whereas kind of the same thing, like the Voracek's kind of the inverse, where he's a black hole defensively. He's okay at moving the puck, but he's still an elite puck moving option, especially on the power play. It seems weird, but they're both 31 years old. And for Columbus now, with this deal, you have $26 million in cap space. You do have UFAs like Dalpe, Matto, McInnes, Del Zotto, and Mikko Lehtinen, which is nothing. RFAs, Sherwood, Laine, Tessier, Jake Bean, Andrew Peak. So they'll be down to, what would you say, anywhere between $15 and $18 million by the time they're done taking care of those RFAs?
Yeah, that seems right.
So they'll have money to spend. It's just interesting to me because Voracek is on 8.25 for the next 3 years, whereas Atkinson is on 5.875 for 4. So they brought in a much more expensive player, someone who you can't necessarily say is better. He's different. This is a very interesting move for the Columbus Blue Jackets, where, again, based off of the trades that had already happened heading into today's show, I was going to do nothing but praise the Blue Jackets. But this one is a real questionable deal, getting rid of a fan favorite like Cam Atkinson for someone who's got a decent amount to prove, I think, in Jake Voracek.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, I feel like Cam Atkinson has suffered without Artemi Panarin. And so maybe Philadelphia sees the ability to pair him with Giroux, who, will be able to get the puck onto Cam Atkinson's stick. And then maybe Columbus sees Voracek as a big puck moving body that can kind of, especially on the power play, make some moves, make some room, get it to Patrick Laine while he's in his office. Like maybe that, I don't know, maybe no team won this trade. Maybe this is a win on both sides. Stylistically.
It could be. Now, we still have to talk about Philly a lot and what this means for them, but we have obviously other Flyers trades to discuss. They have $12.5 million in cap space now. Only UFAs, Sam Morin, Brian Elliott, Alex Lyon. RFAs of Travis Sanheim and Carter Hart. So a decent amount of that $12.5 million is going to go quick. I think this was a big deal for the Flyers to shed a little bit of cap. You take on the extra year of Atkinson, but you shed a little bit of cap. It gives you the money to sign Sanheim, to sign Carter Hart, who we know burned a decent amount of money this past season, and then potentially still make a play in free agency. We'll see how well Cam Atkinson fits in, but my initial reaction is this is a better deal for Philadelphia than Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly clear a lot of cap space, but it seems like Columbus is in a position where they are willing to leverage cap space. I think they have fully accepted that they are in a rebuild mode. And I don't know, maybe they're taking Voracek with the intention to flip him at some point at a deadline in the upcoming seasons. It's hard to say. That's why maybe this is a little bit more confusing for Columbus than I initially thought. But yeah, I mean, it's a good move for Philly. Philly's shedding all sorts of cap space. They're getting rid of players that can't play or at least in their current system. And so I don't know. I think Philly might actually be turning it around here.
Well, we do have a lot to talk about with the Flyers. Again, the tweet is out there, though. And again, some of these deals we still have to break down. But Philadelphia has given up Gostisbehere, Phil Myers, Nolan Patrick, Jake Voracek, a first and 2 seconds for Ellis, Ristolainen, and Atkinson. Major moves in Philadelphia this offseason that will bring us to the Gostisbehere trade, as Philly sent Gostisbehere along with a 2nd and 7th in 2022 for future considerations. So, Deej, in terms of what this meant for Philly, it was obviously a way to free up cap space, and we know what they did with it on the blue line, and that trade's coming up next. So for Philly, there's not too much to discuss there, but for Arizona, it's another trade where they bring in some good assets. Not only just the draft picks, but a usable asset in Shane Gostisbehere for literally nothing. I love it for Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, they bring in Gostisbehere, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around what Arizona is doing right now. I think they are I think in a weird way, what makes me feel weird about it is this seems to me like Arizona is just repeating the past, where they are just taking bad contracts for picks and then just nothing ever really comes of it. And I don't know. I don't know why I feel so weird about that. Obviously, this core that they put together, they signed, didn't work out. They're paying Clayton Keller 7.1 until the end of time. But at the same time, there is a interesting sub-theme here where Shane Gostisbehere and Jake Chychrun are both from the same area of South Florida and played together in the past, I believe.
So for Arizona, I do agree with the idea of like, okay, how many times you're going to put your fan base through this? Like, you really don't still want to be in that spot, and it sucks. I do think, though, it's the right thing for them to do at the time, which is why it's so frustrating, right? I do love this move, though, because, I mean, I'm sorry, but talk about the Great Fog of Buffalo, right? Shane Gostisbehere is, on paper, a significantly better player than Rasmus Ristolainen. It's not close. It's not. So, for Philadelphia to move on from Gostisbehere, I mean, again, it was very clear a change of scenery was needed there. That relationship was just apart. Like, it wasn't going to work. That is what it is. But I look now, you know, again, for Arizona, I like the move a lot in terms of getting a really useful option. For Philadelphia, we'll move on into what this means, because they then went out and acquired Rasmus Ristolainen from the Buffalo Sabres for defenseman Robert Hägg, the 14th overall pick last night, and the 2023 second. In terms, Deej, of what this means for Philly, again, you get rid of Gostisbehere, who just wasn't a fit with the team anymore, even though, again, the metrics are better, and you bring in Rasmus Ristolainen, who, much like with the Chicago Blackhawks, and hoping that, well, he's going to be better here, and we can make it work with this player. That's exactly what Philly's doing. We are hoping that we can make it work with Risto. And you've talked about some of the benefits of Ristolainen, just how, you know, like, he's a big defenseman, and that's still incredibly valued
huge
in the NHL today.
He's enormous.
I mean, it's very obvious what they're looking to do. It's just whether or not it works.
I feel like they paid a pretty hefty price for him, though.
Yes. I mean, again, this is... I think for Buffalo, this is a fantastic return. I mean, Robert Hägg...
for him by the pound. Is that what happened here?
They don't call him the lobster for nothing. Robert Haig is a useful player out of the gates for the Sabres. Like, they need NHL caliber talent. Robert Haig's not the best, but it's okay. You look then at getting the 14th overall pick, though. Like, that's huge for the Sabres. And we'll talk about what they did with that pick. And then the second round pick later on. Again, I think it's a really good deal for Buffalo. And for Philly, it's wait and see. I think this is another very, very risky move that a team has made this offseason where, again, is he going to work? You know, that logic of we're going to be able to fix this player. Time will tell here, and it's a hefty price to pay to try and fix a guy.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't know. I think you make this move if you... I don't think the other moves are so smart that the only reason I think you make this move for Ristolainen here is if you know something we don't. Like whether he's going to work out or play a certain role in the system. It's just I feel like I'm missing a piece of data that Philly might have.
That's fair. Now, I want to point out something as well before we move on to our next trade, because again, Deej and I are watching the second round of the draft as we record this. I want to mention that Ottawa just selected defenseman Ben Roger, 49th overall. The Sens in this draft, in terms of consolidated draft rankings, this comes from a great name, Kyle Cushman, at Kyle_Cush, with a C. Ottawa has now selected the player who had a consolidated rating of 57th. They took him 10th overall. They took the consolidated rating prospect 128th with the 39th pick. Ben Roger was projected to go 241st, and they took him 49th. Ottawa they're just long shot in this.
They are reaching.
Talk about trying to prove that you know something that other people don't. That is the Ottawa Senators in this draft. I had to point that out. That blew my mind how much they're going for it. Because they are absolutely going for it. Deej, speaking of going for it, it's the best segue that I got. There was another trade that happened yesterday.
Yes.
Involving a team saying, we can fix him. He'll be better here than he was there. I don't care how bad the metrics are. He was good before. We'll make him good again. As the Vancouver Canucks acquire Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 12% retained on his contract, so it's a 5.95 cap hit, along with RFA Connor Garland in exchange for Antoine Roussel, Jay Beagle, Louis Eriksson, the 9th overall pick last night, 2022 second, and a 2023 7th. Deej, in terms of what this means for the Canucks, let's talk about that first. You get rid of Roussel, Beagle, and Eriksson, which is phenomenal for you, right? Like, you desperately, with Pettersson and Hughes needing to be signed, you needed to shed a little bit of cap. And while Roussel, Beagle, and Eriksson are all on the last year of their deals, Louis Eriksson was making $6 million. Beagle and Roussel were making $3 million apiece. You shed $12 million in salary cap in fourth line forwards at best. Roussel maybe a decent third liner still. But to do that, as Deej, it's finally happened. I'm sorry, more breaking news. The mystery is over. Aatu Räty has been selected 52nd overall by the New York Islanders.
Why does he go to the bad guys?
Once projected to go top 5 or top 10, he goes 52nd. 4 picks away from maybe falling to the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, and it really bothers me that he pronounces a Y that way.
Oh, I know. A Y is a U. When he has a U in his first name.
Kid's never going to make the show at this rate. Very good player. I think the reason he was originally considered a top pick for this draft, a top 10 guy.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons he fell so far is he plays a very physical game. And this last year, he played in a men's league. And he was a boy. And it takes a long time to develop what the kids call man strength. And so I think in 2 or 3 years, Aatu Räty will be, and that's how I'm going to pronounce it until the end of time. Aatu Räty will be a bona fide NHLer. I think in the vein of a Wayne Simmons, very strong, good in the corners with the skills to play make from that position. So I think this is a great pick for the Islanders, and I wish it wasn't.
So back to the topic at hand then of the Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Garland pickups for the Canucks. Again, they shed some cap, essentially $6 million worth of cap. Now a decent amount of that is going to have to go to now signing Connor Garland, but it frees up a little bit more money to try to handle now the big RFAs. But you gave up the 9th overall pick, along with that second, but still the 9th overall pick to get it done. And you gave it to Arizona, which we'll talk about in a second, but a team that did not have a first-round pick this year due to their own fault. Deej, for the Vancouver Canucks, how do you view the acquisition of OEL and Connor Garland?
So, OEL has not been the player that people want him to be for 4 or 5 seasons now.
Right.
I think that's important, that he has consistently not been OEL. Maybe a change of scenery works. Arizona has been a trash fire in that period of time. They have seen no success, and they have seen hopes dashed at every single level. We may be getting it's not important. Let me finish my thought. So basically, I think OEL, I think we're seeing a salary dump, right? So we're getting Vancouver's entire fourth line in a salary dump for OEL and a salary dump. So to me, this trade is kind of 2 trades. I think it's a first, a second, and a 7th for Connor Garland, who I think is very good and will be even better outside of Arizona.
I was hoping the Bruins were going to get him. I cannot fault Vancouver for getting Garland.
I think he was a perfect fit there.
Yeah.
I mean, if they didn't get Taylor Hall, I think he was the second best option, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
So to me, this is a first, a second, and a 7th for Connor Garland, and then OEL's salary. I'm sorry, 88% of OEL's salary for Roussel, Beagle, and Eriksson. To me, that's how this trade reads.
So, an interesting one for sure. Again, it's a wait-and-see kind of thing, a can-we-fix-him kind of thing for Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but obviously the odds are...
The last time he was good, Obama was president, too.
Oh, God. It's a hell of a way to put it. Deej, for the Arizona Coyotes, this is fantastic. I mean, again, you have to take on Roussel, Beagle, and Eriksson for the year, but you get rid of OEL to do it. That's a no-brainer. And then again, basically, yeah, if you want to view it that way, you got the 9th overall pick and a second-rounder for Connor Garland. Now, Connor Garland said this on leaving Arizona, quote, "Everybody knows what's gone on here. We haven't heard anything from the team since maybe 3 days after the season ended when they asked for our offer. It's been a while waiting for that. You just want to go where you're wanted." For whatever reason, it was clear the Arizona Coyotes just didn't plan on keeping Connor Garland, which can be questionable in and of itself. You know, it's tough because we had talked about it with Deke Slayer when he was on the show a couple months ago about the Arizona Coyotes. That was in the aftermath of that Katie Strang article that came out about what's going on with the ownership, what's going on now that Bill Armstrong is the GM of that team. It's tough because you think of that, you think of what the hell happened here with Garland, but he has made some considerably good moves in the past couple of days with the Coyotes. It's interesting to praise someone who you also can view as somewhat problematic. So it's a bizarre set of circumstances, but for the Arizona Coyotes, I mean, again, I think they got a great deal here, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Coyotes end up winning here. I think this is weirdly a win for a team that needs to turn it around in the wake of the Wendy's scandal.
So tech issues aside, now my internet dropped for a couple minutes there. Pretty sure the last thing we were talking about was the OEL trade with Vancouver. I think we pretty much summed that up as best we can. We do want to get to the actual draft here in a second too, but we do have another trade to talk about, actually another couple. So let's get down to that, Deej. And we'll talk about the trade between Detroit and Columbus because, boy, have we talked about Columbus a lot, and we will continue. They acquire, that is the Columbus Blue Jackets, acquire Jonathan Bernier and the 94th overall pick in this draft, whereas Detroit picks up goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic. I was at the dentist's office getting ready to have a tooth pulled when you mentioned, LOL, have you seen what just happened? What is Carolina doing? And that is because Alex Nedeljkovic just became the first Calder nominee ever to be dealt before the start of the next season. That trophy is nearly 100 years old. It's been around since 1933. He is the first ever finalist to get dealt before the start of the next season. He immediately signs a 2-year, $3 million per contract. Carolina apparently offered 1.5. I think the rumor was he wanted 3.5. Let's talk about what it means for the Hurricanes, Deej. They get a 3rd-round pick, but they get Jonathan Bernier while moving on from Nedeljkovic. How do you feel a few days later?
So my initial take was Carolina's stupid. I still feel like this is still a bad move. I understand, though, the need for a consistent goaltender in Bernier. Maybe they feel like their window's closing and they don't have time to wait for Nedeljkovic. I would argue that Nedeljkovic was there. And I don't know. I guess from Carolina's perspective, this is stupid. It seems like it's a disservice to the fan base. You're going to lose Dougie Hamilton. Now you lose your Calder defenseman or your Calder goaltender. Arguably, I mean, he's the best goalie your team's seen since Cam Ward, and you just trade him away for nothing because you don't want to pay him what is significantly less than what he's worth. That's insane to me.
So, Greg Wyshynski mentioned, the sense I get is that Carolina didn't see Nedeljkovic's 3-month run as proof enough to commit the money. They're notorious for going cheaper in net. I don't disagree with the idea of $3.5 million for 3 years. That's a risk for a goalie who was on waivers earlier in the season and, 24, 25, finally looks like he starts putting it together. But I don't disagree that that's a risk. It's a calculated take to not commit to that. And Jonathan Bernier has been fantastic in Detroit. Again, he's one of my go-to players. As a side note, the Chicago Blackhawks just selected Colton Dach, who was, of course, Kirby's younger brother. They now have the Jones and the Dach brothers. Jonathan Bernier is my go-to argument for here's a player on a bad team who still puts up good numbers as a goaltender. Whenever someone's like, well, the reason this good goalie doesn't have good numbers is because the team in front of him. It's like, what about Jonathan Bernier in Detroit? Is always the response that you'll get. So I do like Jonathan Bernier behind a team like the Carolina Hurricanes, even if it is sans Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah.
So I don't hate it for Carolina. I get their logic. For Detroit, though, you get a younger goalie who could be there for a real long time with Alex Nedeljkovic. I mean, I like it for Carolina. I like it for Detroit. And Steve Yzerman mentioned this. This was from Nolan Bianchi. I think it might be Bianchi. Steve Yzerman on the Nedeljkovic trade. You're going to have to ask them why they were comfortable doing that, which everyone's like, oh, he feels like he fleeced him, which, it seems to be the thing. I will say, apparently it works out well for Nedeljkovic. I guess his fiance goes to Michigan State, so he's going to be playing in Michigan now. It's a move that seems to work out for both teams, for both players involved. It's just obviously the stunning nature of here's a Calder finalist who got dealt this soon, and it's the first time that's ever happened.
I think that if Nedeljkovic goes anywhere other than Detroit, maybe we're not looking at this as Carolina got fleeced. It's that Stevie Y is almost never wrong. And I think that's why people are looking at this as Carolina got fleeced. And I think if he goes to any other team, then people are like, oh, maybe there's some concerns, like he only played for a couple months, like he was on waivers. But Stevie Y is never wrong. Carolina lost this trade.
There you go. I'll mention this as well. We'll just tack this on. I brought him up earlier. Carolina also traded Jake Bean to the Columbus Blue Jackets for the 44th overall pick in round number 2, which, if I am not mistaken, just to get the clarification on who that was. Ultimately, there have actually been a lot of deals involving draft picks. Ended up being Alexei Hymosalmi. So who knows there for an 18-year-old Finn. Again, for Carolina, we'll wait and see. It's surprising to see them move on from Jake Bean, admittedly. For the Blue Jackets, again, you talk about now you have Boqvist. You talk about other moves that they've made. I mean, for Carolina, we'll wait and see. You're moving on from Jake Bean, but for the Blue Jackets, it's tough to not like this trade at face value.
Yeah, I think this looks very good for the Jackets. And obviously they're short of defense. I mean, they added Boqvist. I don't know. It's interesting to me. I think this looks good for the Jackets, and I think for me it's difficult to comment on any move made by the Blue Jackets because I have no idea what their plan is right now. They seem to be making a lot of moves that don't necessarily line up with one another.
Change everything seems to be the plan.
Yeah, that seems exactly what's happening.
And it's interesting that Jarmo Kekalainen's being allowed to do it, right? Because he had a run, the team couldn't get past the second round, and now he's almost Mark Bergevin-esque being allowed to rebuild it again.
Yeah.
Don't see that too often. The final trade we have to talk about, unless we finally get word on Sam Reinhart, you notice how that, I think the draft has been live, the second round's been live for
Sam Reinhart
2 hours.
Has been spelunking for the last 48 hours. They were unable to reach him. That's why the trade wasn't called.
We had the Rangers and Blues trade as the Blues acquire Pavel Buchnevich for Sammy Blais and a second-round pick next year. Deej, in terms of what this means for both teams, I mean, I'll quote this article. It's from Shayna at Hey Shay on Twitter. Buchnevich is a very good top-line caliber player who really hit his stride this season. Sammy Blais is a year younger, ranks as a fourth liner, and very soon projects to be replacement level. I like Sammy Blais a bit more than that. But for the Rangers, I mean, there's no denying this is a downgrade. I mean, the second round pick is nice. You do get an NHL caliber player in Sammy Blais, but it reads as we're not wanting to commit this money to Pavel Buchnevich because we have something else in mind.
It does read that way. And I think part of the fallout of this is apparently, and this is just rumors that I've read on Twitter, apparently this is a very unpopular move in the New York locker room, which would make sense. Buchnevich has been one of their better players for a while. I mean, obviously they've acquired better players since then, but in my opinion, Buchnevich is not the type of player you let go of. He's a player that improves every single year. He plays up to the level of the players you put around him. He has been there when New York sucked. He's been there when New York made some runs and almost made the playoffs this year. And then you get rid of him for a guy that's nowhere near as good as him because you don't want to pay him. That's stupid. Like, what are you going to do with that free agent money? Sign Derek Stepan for 2 years? You know, it's like I don't understand what people think they're doing by clearing this cap space. Like, what are they going to do? Make a run at Ovi only for him to sign in Washington for $3 million because he doesn't give a shit anymore? Like, it's
so for me, it's either you think Jack Eichel, or I think more importantly, Dougie Hamilton, because that defense to me is the reason why I said they wouldn't make the playoffs last year. Again, Adam Fox is a stud and a half, absolutely. Norris winner. Jacob Trouba has been inconsistent so far. He was good this year, so we'll see. But then from there, it's a lot of young, unproven talent, for the most part. Ryan Lindgren, Keandre Miller, Zach Jones, Libor Hayek. I could not, as of this day, say that team's going to make the playoffs. And again, in terms of cap space, they have 21, almost 22 million, while not needing to re-sign anybody major aside from Shesterkin. And that's with $4.4 million in dead cap this year between Lundqvist, Shattenkirk, Girardi, and D'Angelo now. So for me, it's like you need to shore up that blue line if you're going to make the playoffs this year. You have to. I don't think you can bank on these young players being able to carry the weight. I mean, again, Lindgren's 23, Miller's 21, Jones is 20, and Hayek's 23. I think that's what we're looking at. If it's not Jack Eichel, perhaps it shouldn't be. It should be making a major run at some of the best defensemen that are out there right now. Because I think forward-wise, I mean, again, you have Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, Strome. Like, you could argue, like, yeah, Jack Eichel would guarantee that team being unbelievable. But I think the issue is for the New York Rangers right now, and why I still don't know if they'll be a predicted playoff team for me in the upcoming season, is they still need a lot of work. I still say they're going to win a Stanley Cup within the next decade. They need a lot of work, though.
I mean, to me, if you subscribe to the theory that, I mean, almost all NHL teams still do this, so I think it's weird. If you subscribe to the theory that you want your defensemen to have opposite-handedness, right? If you don't want to pair two guys the same handedness together, are you really going to give Dougie Hamilton $9 million for 6-7 years just to be on your second pairing behind Adam Fox?
That's a hell of a 1-2 punch. I'll say that.
I mean, it is a hell of a 1-2 punch, but I don't know. To me, I don't know why you're gonna get rid of the Boucher just to give Doug money. I don't know. It's weird. I think it has to be a run at Eichel. I guess Eichel would make sense here. That's the only thing that makes sense. But at the same time, you make this move, and Eichel talks have very much chilled out.
It's true.
And I think that's why it feels very weird. So I don't know. To me, if you don't end up with Eichel, this is a loss in my book.
I can agree with that. So moving on then. That was kind of the last trade that we had to talk about. Let's talk about round one. Although actually for the Blues, I guess we should mention, I think you can kind of tell what our opinion's going to be. This is fantastic. Getting Pavel Buchnevich just fantastic. Like there's no other way to say it. He is one of the most underrated players in the league from a statistical analytical standpoint. It might mean that they're out on picking up somebody like Landeskog, but I really like this deal for the Blues.
Yeah, this is huge. First of all, imagine if Tarasenko doesn't get hurt. I mean, I know that's pie in the sky dream, but then you've got Buchnevich. Like the Blues might be turning around. Don't get me wrong. In my opinion, like there is a quote unquote embarrassment of riches or whatever at defense, but none of those guys really have worked out. So I still see this team as recovering from the loss of Vince Dunn. I think that is a blow to their roster. But now you got Buchnevich. They won this trade.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So yeah, if I'm a St. Louis fan, I'm excited about something for the first time in a year here.
Right. I'll mention this as well really quickly again, just so we follow the draft. Shout out to the Anaheim Ducks, who have had a really good day too so far. Olin Zellweger, they just picked up Sasha Pastujoff.
In the third round, they picked up Sasha
and
Pastujoff.
He was one of the more highly touted guys. Like at the end of our list here, I had some of the notable prospects that hadn't been drafted. And Top Down Hockey listed Sasha Pastujoff as the number one forward on his board that was left, and Olin Zellweger as his number one defenseman. The Anaheim Ducks
he only
just got
tweeted
both
that 12 times today.
Yeah, the Anaheim Ducks got both of them. It's ridiculous. The Kings have had a good day too. Fucking California drafting well. At least 2 out of 3.
Yeah, might as well check Patrick Bacon's followers for at Anaheim Ducks official.
We will talk about the Sharks doing well in a second, though. In fairness, Sharks fans, just calm down. So, should we talk about the magic that was round one last night, Deej? Because there is a decent amount to talk about, as we do. Just a couple of quick notes, pretty much on every player as we go through this. Obviously, Owen Power was the consensus number one. He still goes number one to the Sabres. Again, every year it's, well, this guy might sneak in, but I mean, Deej, as you mentioned, he's 6'5", 214 pounds, an offensive defenseman. Like he's basically an Ekblad clone. He was going number one.
He's actually taller than Ekblad by an inch, and you know what he has that Ekblad doesn't? A giant porcelain flamingo. If you saw his video chat, that's what was hanging out behind him. It was pretty weird because, okay, so here's the thing, right? this is what I don't want to get too much into this, but here's what fascinates me about the giant porcelain flamingo.
Right.
If he was at his parents' house, you think they would be surrounding him to celebrate, but no, he was by himself, which leads you to believe that he is the owner of this giant porcelain flamingo. I want answers. Right? Like, it's not just his parents' giant porcelain flamingo. Otherwise, they'd be there hugging him.
Oh,
it's
God.
his flamingo.
The episode title has to be something related to the flamingo.
Oh, the episode title is It's His Flamingo.
Now, I mentioned top-down hockey, Patrick Bacon, a couple minutes ago here. We are going to refer to his interesting model that's out there. It's not the end-all, be-all, but there are a couple of examples that I do want to refer to here. And it's that graphic you might have seen that lists someone's chance of becoming an NHLer, which means 200 games played, and their chance of becoming a star, which would equate to being in the top 18.5% of wins above replacement per 82 games. So, again, ranking the top players according to wins above replacement in a full season. Owen Power's listed at a 97% chance of becoming an NHLer, which sounds about right. An 18% chance of becoming a star, which is high, as you'll find out. He had him ranked 11th overall, third amongst defenders. So interesting, but I think that kind of goes along the lines of people saying, like, okay, we don't really know how good Owen Power is going to be, but he's not out of the, he's not a reach at number one. And it sets up Buffalo with now Dahlin, Jokiharju, Samuelsson, Laaksonen, Power, Ryan Johnson on D. The Sabres actually have some pretty good options in their organization on the blue line.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not going to be a fast rebuild. This is going to take a while. And so I think it makes sense to grab a defensive prospect like Power that's not going to step right into the NHL next year. It takes a year or two, gives you time to clean the locker room, bleach everything, get rid of the fog, just get rid of this whole last year, maybe burn some stuff. Yeah.
Oh, God. Second overall, we had the Seattle Kraken's first ever draft pick. He was pretty much the consensus number 2 center, Matty Beniers, who is pretty much the prototypical number 1 two-way center. And again, in terms of the top-down hockey ratings, it's interesting, though, because only a 43% chance of becoming an NHL or 10% chance of becoming a star. So already you can kind of see the differences already. Again, just interesting to refer to the model, not saying it's the end all be all, but Deej, the Kraken might have their future number 1 center here.
Yeah. I'm going to imagine the Kraken did their due diligence, or maybe he has a brother they can draft next year or something. But I didn't think he was going to go second because that injury was brutal. I don't know. I'd imagine they did their due diligence, and that I thought for sure Bill Eklund was going to go second here. But Beniers, had he not been injured, I would say was a lock for second. And my guess is the Kraken did their due diligence here, and the injury's not as bad as I assumed it was.
Third overall, the Anaheim Ducks picked up center Mason McTavish. He was projected to go around 8th overall. Again, someone else, another all-around complete center. The model loves him, though. 70% chance of being an NHLer, 21% chance of being a star. Top down had him at 9th among skaters, 7th among forwards. And it sets them up interestingly now, Deej, in terms of depth. Sam Steele and Isaac Lundstrom, there's some questions around them, but they do have Benoit Olivier Giroux up the middle. But then the big name that stands out is McTavish joins Trevor Zegras as possible center options moving forward.
Yeah, I love this for the Ducks. And what can you say about the guy other than models love him?
I'm sold. Draft him to my team, please.
Well, it's also one of these things where I think we'll get to some real reaches later. But I think, when I talked about this draft, the scouting, the amount of games these guys played, the weird leagues they had to play in, everything because of the pandemic was all over the place.
Right.
And so I think that taking a guy ranked 8th, 3rd overall is not the reach it would be any other year.
Typically. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's definitely a thing to remember.
Reaches.
Yes. That's the thing to remember about this model, though, and he was very open and honest about this. It's like, man, if someone played in Denmark this season, it's not going to reflect very positively on them. So it's just it's interesting how it's just kind of how it went. But we'll move on. Pick number 4. I mean, maybe one of the feel-good stories of the draft. Luke Hughes goes to the New Jersey Devils, the defenseman, projected 5th. Very promising offensive defenseman with size and elite skating. Of course, the brother of Quinn and now teammate Jack. On that model, 71% chance of becoming an NHLer, 11% chance of becoming a star. So, again, it's interesting. It seems like bigger defensemen, according to that model, have a better shot. But the Devils now have him, Ty Smith, Kevin Ball, Nikita Hotyuk, Shakira Mukhamadullin. Again, for the Devils, it looks good. And again, you end up with 2 out of the 3 Hughes brothers.
So, to me, I don't want to say this is a reach. I thought for sure Luke Hughes' stock was going to be affected significantly more by the injury he took that kept him out of the World Juniors. And for those of you that are not aware, he had a skate blade go through the tongue of his boot and sever the tendons in his foot. He has not skated since then. And those are the tendons you use to skate. Especially, there are concerns in his draft profile. It just says there are concerns that he will never be able to skate the same way again. And to me, I think if this was not Jersey's pick, Luke Hughes would not have gone here. To take an injury like that at 17 years old that you will likely never recover from is huge. Not to say that Luke Hughes does not project as an NHL defenseman. I just think that his skating is not going to be where it could have been. I still think he ends up being an elite NHL defenseman. It's just interesting to me. I think that if this were any other team's pick, it would not have been Luke Hughes because of that injury.
I think that's fair enough. The Columbus Blue Jackets, 5th overall, picked up center Kent Johnson, also projected in the top 10. Consolidated ranking was about 9th. Fantastic playmaker. The model, again, from top down, likes him a lot. 65% chance to play at least 200 games, 21% chance to be a star player. And the Jackets outright needed forward prospects, and they did pretty well in terms of picking up defensive options. So, as we'll see throughout this draft, I mean, you might as well start at center. I really like this pick for them, too. I mean, D, just kind of be a theme for me is it's a lot of teams where I'm like, I see what you're doing here, and I think you're doing a pretty good job at that.
So to me, there is an interesting situation here, right? Like, so I like this Kent Johnson pick. However, I feel like a lot of these picks are kind of all coming from the same pool, which is this Michigan team.
Yes.
And to me, I think this could be a situation like where who is getting the true stars of this team? You know what I'm saying? Either this is the greatest college hockey team of all time, or some of these teams are really going to whiff on these picks.
That's fair.
And so that to me is like, I mean, you take Kent Johnson here, obviously, because, might as well get a ticket from the University of Michigan lottery. But it, to me, I don't know. There's just that inherent risk of some of these picks are going to be whiffs coming from Michigan.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. Pick number 6 to the Detroit Red Wings, Deej, was defenseman Simon Edmondson. He was projected 7th. Very strong skater, defensive defenseman. Again, the model likes him. 34% chance to be a solid NHLer. 2% though for a star player, which for a defensive defenseman makes sense. Top down had him 45th overall, 12th among defenders. But I do like that he joins Ronick, Moritz Seider especially, Wallander on defense. This pick, a lot of people were clamoring for Detroit to take who went 7th with this next selection, but this really did seem like a Steve Yzerman, this is my guy type of pick.
Yeah. 1, this guy's huge. 2, Stevie Y's never wrong. I mean, There you
go. That's all you need to know, pretty much. And then we get to pick number 7, and the San Jose Sharks went for it. And they took center/left wing William Eklund, who was projected 3rd. Again, rumored at one time to be looked at by the Sabres for the number 1 pick. complete 3-zone player. Top Down had them as their number one player, according to their model, in this draft each, with a 97% chance to play at least 200 NHL games and a 71% chance to be a star player. Obviously, the model here really liking the fact that he was so successful as a young player in the SHL amongst, the comparison you made with Ratu, struggling a little bit in a men's league. Eklund did not. And the Sharks desperately needed a high-end prospect like this. So this is a major win for them on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird to see the Sharks get a win, right? This feels like a real change of pace for them. Just in terms of bad contracts, we've talked about it. When is something good going to happen to the Sharks? And so they get their first top 10 pick in 6 years, and they take a guy who I believe can walk right into the NHL.
There's a decent
Even
shot
though he
of it,
struggled in an NHL in a men's league, he still has NHL talent year one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird depending on what way the Sharks want to go, right? You could make that call of going for it, or you could serve to be a little bit more patient and wait it out. And I think either way, they have a guy where they can afford to do that and still be okay. LA at 8, defender Brent Clark. He was projected top 4 in a way with consolidated ratings. Really good two-way defenseman. Again, Top Down, big fan of him as well. 98% chance to make the NHL, 30% to be a star player. And the Kings desperately needed another defensive prospect. I mean, you could say like Tobias Bjornfot was their best defensive prospect. So to get a player of this caliber, I think is fantastic for them. I really like this pick for LA. And I mentioned them rounds 2 and 3 so far. They're doing really well as well. I think this is just fantastic for the LA Kings. They've had a really good couple of days already, and the draft's not even over.
Yeah, when your GM is a Hall of Fame defenseman and you pick a defenseman with the number 8 pick that's already been compared to Adam Fox, I've got to assume that this kid's going to be real good.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think so, right? And a lot goes into that. You got to remember who the GM of these teams are and the reputations of what they're going to be looking for. Number 9. I was going to say, I thought this was the skip pick. It wasn't. This is where Arizona got back in. Number 9, they select winger Dylan Guenther, who was projected 6th. Again, they were originally out of the first round. So the trade with Vancouver becomes OEL and Garland for Roussel, Beagle, Eriksson, Guenther, a 2nd and a 7th. That looks pretty good because Guenther, pure sniper. And again, that top-down model, 92% chance to be a solid NHLer, 50% chance to be an elite sniper in this league, a star player. And this, I think, instantly becomes Arizona's top prospect. They needed another forward, and I think Barrett Hayton, with some of the concerns that have been there for him, it almost reminds me of like the Alex Holtz pick for New Jersey last year, someone else who I think went 8th. And or 7th, actually. And he was someone else who people were like, he could go top 5. So I think, again, for the deal that they made to get the pick, getting rid of OEL, and you get a player of the caliber of Dylan Guenther, fantastic for Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they're turning around. That's the other thing, too, is Arizona. I don't want to say that their prospect cupboard was completely barren, but it was not great. And, losing that 11th overall pick, we'll get to that, but they needed to do something here. And so I'm glad to see them grab a goal scorer, which is not something they really have in the system in any way whatsoever. So good for them.
I said on Twitter, like I said earlier in the show, it's really weird to praise Bill Armstrong, but I really like what the Coyotes have done. And then you get to the first big reach of the draft, as the Ottawa Senators at 10 take left wing Tyler Boucher, son of former goaltender Brian Boucher, projected in the 2nd round for the most part. Bob McKenzie had him at the 29th spot in his mock draft. Top-down model, 20% chance to make the NHL, 4% chance to be a star player. Had him ranked 30th, 23rd amongst forwards. There are injury concerns, but the comparable is almost like a Tom Wilson Brad Marchand, Brady Kachuk. Like, it's just that type of in your face all the time power
So
forward
the kid's a
type.
piece of shit. You know, plays the game. He plays the game the right way. He brings that grit and sandpaper that was really good 11 years ago. It's a weird reach. I'm going to assume him being the son of Brian Boucher probably got some scouts to look at him in a year where, you know, it's weird, right? I think if you played in the USHL this year, obviously Tyler Boucher coming from the National Team Development Program, Go Development Program in Plymouth, Michigan. You know, the pride of Plymouth, Michigan. Go Developers. I think I don't know. I think he's not a top 10 pick most other years, but maybe Ottawa's trying to prove something to us, and I think they're not going to. They hired Pierre Maguire. They're not going to do anything right. Like, it's just like, what do you expect from the Senators here? Obviously, I want this kid to prove me wrong. I think in a way, DJ Smith must have been in on this because this seems to be the type of game he likes to play, is incredibly gritty in the corners. I don't know. This is weird. The Senators are reaching, and I don't think really as an extremely rebuilding franchise, they're in a place to necessarily reach unless they have information no one else has. And when you get information no one else has, you end up retiring and opening a Wendy's. So I don't know.
God. Pick number 11. I can't possibly top that. Pick number 11 was Arizona's forfeited pick, again, due to illegal
this pick
scouting.
was locked in.
So we get to pick number 12. And again, I really like this pick as well. The Columbus Blue Jackets pick up center Cole Sillinger, who was projected 13th. This was the pick used from the Seth Jones trade, which makes it that much better. 94% chance to be an NHLer, 63% chance to be a star, according to Top Down. Was their second overall player behind Eklund. Another pure sniper. Indeed, within 12 picks, they had Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger up the middle in Columbus, which, again, it's interesting that Jarmo is being allowed to rebuild out of his own mess, but goddamn, those are two great players to, kick off that rebuild with down the middle.
Yeah, and I mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. He is the son of Suitcase Sillinger and is weirdly a Blue Jackets legacy player because of that. He played for the Blue Jackets for a season and a half, I believe. So, it's a good pickup for them. It's a team that does not have any centers, really, and now they have two of them.
Especially if Max Domi's not a part of the long-term plans. Pick number 13, speaking of long-term plans, we still don't know what the hell Calgary's doing, but they took left wing Matthew Coronato, who was projected 16th. Again, Top Down loves him. 84% chance to be an NHLer, 45% chance to be a star. He was their fourth-rated player. He's 5'10", but more of a power forward. So, like a Marchand comparison, maybe. They really needed help on the wing in the system as well. So I really do like this pick for Calgary. I mean, it looks like a potential steal at 13. It's just, where the hell is this team going by the time where are they going to be by the time this kid arrives?
Well, I know where this kid's going to be, and he's going to Harvard next year. So he's a Harvard man. And he's also coming from this very good Chicago Steel team that, outside of the Developers, I would say is one of the best teams in the USHL. So I don't know. I don't think this is a bad pick for the Flames. I think the issue with grading any pick for the Flames right now is that the Calgary Flames, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree with me, are kind of directionless right now.
Very, very. I mean, we've had that conversation, right? And just very much in between. Do you run it back with the Goodrows and the Monahans of the world? You just lost Giordano because you didn't want to pay the price it would have been to keep him. Where do you go if you're the Calgary Flames? And I think we still need to find that out this offseason. Pick number 14, Deej. If the Boucher pick wasn't a reach, this was, apparently. Pick number 14, Buffalo selects winger Isaac Rosen. He was projected 21st, but the top-down model absolutely hates this guy. A 1% chance at being an NHLer, a 0% chance of being a star player, ranked 217th, 150th amongst forwards, despite him being a prototypical offensive player, good puck, good shot, good speed, etc. They needed forward help, but I guess for this guy, it depends on who you ask as to whether or not he's going to be anything.
You're telling me the models didn't like a guy that put up 1 assist and 0 goals in 22 games with Lexington?
Can you believe it?
I don't know. It's weird. I also find it weird when guys pre-draft comparables aren't necessarily top tier players, especially, when guys go in the first round. Like everybody's like NHL comparable, Austin Matthews mixed with Connor McDavid with a little bit of Malkin. So it's weird to me that this is a guy whose comparable is usually like Nikolai Ehlers. And obviously he's struggling to play against men. I'm going to say that's probably because he weighs 150 pounds.
That might have something to do with it.
So I don't know. I mean, the Sabres have made some shrewd moves. The kid's going to put on weight. I don't think it's that big of a stretch. So we'll see. I just think it's weird that the Buffalo Sabres, who kind of all their eggs are in that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen egg basket. And I felt like they were going to go with a goalie here, and I was wrong.
Oh, delightful. Pick number 15, first goalie off the board. He was projected 18th. Sebastian Cossa goes to the Detroit Red Wings. They traded picks number 23, 48, and 138 to the Dallas Stars to get him. Dallas would pick up, again, Wyatt Johnston, who we'll talk about soon. He was the number 1 goalie drafted. Detroit has 1,000 goaltenders in their system. He is instantly the best. And Deej, there will forever be that comparable between him and Jesper Wallstedt as to whether or not he was the right guy. But as mentioned, the Yzer plan. Who are you to doubt Steve Yzer?
I mean, I said this 9 picks ago. I'm going to say it here. Stevie Y's never wrong. 2, this guy's huge. And I think, if we're going to always make a comparison here of Sebastian Cossa, I think we need to say we might make another comparison here. When was the last time Stevie Y drafted a young, huge goaltender? Because I believe that guy just won the Conn Smythe.
And back-to-back Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
Deej, we got another super interesting pick here in terms of who is promising and who isn't. This has to be the one that this is why we included the top-down models, because this one lit Twitter on fire. Number 16, the New York Rangers picked left wing Brennan Othman, who was projected 17th, but that top-down model hates him. 3% chance to be an NHLer, 1% chance to be a star. Was ranked 74th amongst forwards. Like, super hard worker, good shot. The Rangers already have some good defensive prospects, so some forward help makes sense, but that's a player where it just seems like a complete toss-up as to whether or not that's going to age well.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I laughed when you were talking about this pick is not just the Twitter drama, but when I was reading a draft recap last night, just going over the players, because I wasn't that familiar with some of those prospects, especially a guy like Brennan Othman, but just the little blurb below him just said, not the best forward available. And I was like, oh, okay, New York. But that's fine. I'm sure like not taking the best forward available is what you want to do is the second you get rid of Pavel Buchnevich.
I mean, it seems like a plan for sure. Pick number 17, the St. Louis Blues picked up center Zach Bolduc. He was projected 22nd. Again, the model wasn't a big fan of him. 14% NHLer, 3% star. Typical skill set for like a junior player is, a good junior player seems to be the thing. The Blues could have gone any which direction. You get rid of Vince Dunn, maybe you want to draft a defender, but they could use some forward help too. They go for Bolduc, and I mean, for what we know now, it's just really kind of a toss-up. We'll see what happens, especially considering there was a lot more fanfare surrounding the guy who went next.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, here's what happens, right? The St. Louis Blues are weak at center. They need a center. They pick Bolduc because the guy that went next had major surgery. I think otherwise these 2 picks are flipped around.
I do agree. And that pick is number 18 of the Winnipeg Jets center, maybe name of the draft until we get to the Panthers, Chaz Lucius. who was projected
Man,
12th.
that is a ska band name if I've ever heard one. That man plays tuba or trombone in a ska band. He is not a hockey player. I refuse to believe it.
He was projected top 10, if not closing in on top 5, before Deej mentioned he got hurt. The model still loves him in that 70% chance to make the NHL, 20% to be a star player, 10th overall according to Top Down Hockey in general. Dynamic goal scorer, though. And Deej, this feels like the second year in a row the Winnipeg Jets have gotten a steal at center. They got Cole Perfetti last year, who dominated the AHL, and now you get Chaz Lucius. If he shakes off these injury troubles, getting this guy at 18, I mean, you know, the Jets are in a really weird spot, obviously in the aftermath of trading Patrick Laine, but man, up the middle, it's a promising future. I mean, if you still consider Dubois a center, Dubois, Perfetti, Lucius as a 1-2-3, my God, if you don't move anybody over to the wing, like, there's a lot of potential here for the Jets, and they haven't really been one of those teams that's been talked about a ton this weekend.
Yeah, to me, this guy has world-class embouchure. He can hit notes perfectly with the trombone slides, and he can skank in the pits.
Pick number 19, with the Nashville Predators, they took forward Fedor Svechkov. Just an outright forward, projected 14th. Top-down model didn't like him too much. 13% to be an NHL or 2% to be a star. 52nd ranked player. But he is arguably the best defensive forward in the class, which to me, Deej, makes it a very Nashville pick. They need help everywhere, so what do? They take the shutdown two-way forward. It's just such a Nashville pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, I don't know. It's interesting to me that this is now 2 years in a row that the Nashville Predators have gone to Russia with their first rounder.
Mm-hmm. I will say, though, I did see a different graph, not from Top Down, about Askarov, because obviously a lot of comparisons come up, especially when we consider pick number 20 here in a minute. Askarov's projections are like better right now than what Vasilevsky's were at the same age. So there is a chance that Nashville has absolutely struck gold with Yaroslav Askarov, but there's a chance Minnesota at pick 20 has done the same thing as they trade up to take goaltender Jesper Wallstedt, who was projected to be a top 10 pick at goalie. They had to trade pick number 22 and 90 to the Oilers to get him. 22 became Xavier Bourgault. And it's interesting now because the Wild are stacked in terms of goalies. They kept Capo Kakkonen, which is shocking. They already have Hunter Jones in the system. And now you add Jesper Wallstedt, who was probably the consensus number one goaltender in this draft. It's interesting that Minnesota, of all teams, were the ones to go up and get him.
I think what happened here is that Bill Guerin doesn't know how to text, and he thinks that Capo Kakkonen is on Seattle. He just hasn't checked his phone. He doesn't understand the texting. And I don't know. So this is weird. Like, I guess, all right, so here's my take, right?
Deej's Take podcast.
Deej's Take, the spinoff, with all the latest ska. So I think maybe Capo Kakkonen's not as good as we think he is. I mean, obviously, I think based on what little we know about Jesper Wallstedt, he has a higher ceiling than Capo Kakkonen.
Mm-hmm.
But for Minnesota to expose him in the expansion draft and then go on to draft a goalie, that to me says something is up with Capo Kakkonen.
That's fair.
I think, yeah, you know, I mean, I don't know how, I guess, like, if there isn't, then I'm missing something about how the NHL works, because to me, those two things are both signs that they do not see Capo Kakkonen as a long-term solution, and they see Cam Talbot as a stopgap until Jesper Wallstedt's ready.
Who's to say for sure? It's one of the more interesting talking points coming out of the first round.
Absolutely.
21st overall, the Boston Bruins do not select a gritty player. They selected right wing Fabian Lysell, who was projected 11th overall. Top down model absolutely hates him because, again, he was playing in a men's league and didn't do well. I'm sure Deej will get the stat line for us. But 2% chance to be an NHLer, 1% chance to be a star. Top down had him as the 143rd ranked player, 96th forward. Despite the fact that he has top-notch foot speed and is a pretty solid playmaker, But they finally took a skilled forward over someone like Frederick or John Boucher, which makes me happy. I mean, I am surprised they didn't take a defenseman to replace the outgoing Lozon. But my initial reaction was, hey, you actually took someone who was projected to go in the first round. But yeah, there's a little bit of concern over the potential model. But, Deej, I don't know actually if you have that stat line. But again, there's some room for concern.
So this is interesting. So he actually scored 3 times as many points as Isaac Rosen. So he scored 3 points in 26 games.
3 points.
But what's interesting here is that much like Isaac Rosen, Fabian Lysel's NHL comparable is Nikolai Ehlers, which is Nikolai Ehlers just the guy where they're like, he can pass, he skate. I think, like, did they just pull that out of a hat time and time again?
I don't know.
Something I do think is interesting. Don Sweeney, I believe, 5 of 6 drafts he's gone with a defenseman. It almost feels weird that he went with a forward here.
Like I said, he has taken like Frederick and Beecher, but yeah, like Urho Vakanainen was taken as well. It's just an uncharacteristic style pick for Don Sweeney for sure.
I mean, the guy got 3 points.
Yeah, so I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping he can be the Swedish meatball to David Pasternak's sweet pasta dish. Time will tell. 22. The Edmonton Oilers picked forward Xavier Bourgault, as mentioned. Center, projected 23rd. Again, they get him at 22. Top-down model liked him. Decent amount. 25% chance to be an NHLer. 21st overall. 16th best forward. Another player who has a wicked shot is his best asset. And again, for the Oilers, you need a little bit of help everywhere. So I don't hate this. I mean, you do give up the option to take a Wallstead, which you might not have necessarily needed, to get, a center option. So not the worst deal in the world.
Yeah, I've seen this pick called a reach. I don't know. So lately there's been this thing where guys drafted out of the queue are weirdly unpredictable.
Yes.
And I think Bourgeot here is one of the best players in the queue. And this pick, I just don't have enough data on this guy. To me, I guess like no matter who you draft here at 22, they're not going to immediately make an impact on your roster. So I think even though Edmonton is in dire need of defense, it really doesn't matter what position you pick at 22 because they're not going to be on the roster for 2 years. Right. So obviously they see something here in Xavier Bourgeot, and I mean, he's lighting up the queue, so maybe it translates.
Pick number 23, previously aforementioned center Wyatt Johnston to the Dallas Stars, projected to be a second or third rounder. Top-down model, not a big fan either. 4% chance to be an NHLer, 1% chance to be a star. Was the 114th ranked player, 77th for forwards. Heavy, grinding style. And Deej, when I read that, I'm like, this is a real Bruins pick. This is who I thought the Bruins would go for sure.
And his name's Wyatt.
And his name is Wyatt. The Stars need help everywhere and maybe a little bit more on defense. So this is interesting because you're drafting a guy where you're like, yeah, he'll probably be our third-line center in the future. It's weird to do in the first round.
Yeah.
Happens a lot, though, mainly with the Boston Bruins.
Well, okay, we'll get to that in a second. I do have some breaking news, but we're going to wait until this next pick because it is related to the Florida Panthers.
Ooh.
So the Sam Reinhart trade is in.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's really good.
I have officially seen it, yes.
So a first and a 7th for Sam Reinhart. That 7th, of course, being Devin Levi. So, that's pretty. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty.
You want to talk about it then? I mean, I'm not sure how much you have to add about Wyatt Johnson. Okay, so
the deal, you get a 7th last year. You get the 32nd overall pick for Sam Reinhart. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, so the deal is officially Sam Reinhart to the Panthers in exchange for Florida's first-round pick next year and former 7th-round pick, Team Canada goalie Devin Levi to the Sabres. So, I mean, for the Sabres, you got an interesting goalie. We've seen some goalies like Dustin Wolf go late in the rounds where you're like, how is this guy such a late pick? For the Florida Panthers to give up a first-round pick, you're a playoff team before getting Sam Reinhart. You're definitely a playoff team after getting Sam Reinhart.
I mean, that's the 32nd overall pick.
It could be.
On paper right now, yes. It's like, Jesus. This team is going to be insane next year. Our third line is going to be Anton Lundell, Frank Vetrano, and Sam Reinhart.
It's pretty nuts.
And then we win the first round, at least as far as names are concerned. We draft another. So the Chicago Steel team, very, very, very good. I'm
not over the Sam Reinhart trade. That is such a good pickup for the Cats. My God.
Yeah, they're basically the best team in the league now. Just all they need to do is send Anton Strawman back to medical school. And in case you didn't know about that, he is a licensed paramedic in Sweden.
There you go.
Their high school seems a lot more efficient than ours. So
pick number 24 to the Florida Panthers was
Mackie
center
Samoskevich.
This
is really weird. I guess
was a
Vito
fringe
said,
first rounder. In
fringe first rounder. People have nothing but positive things to say about this guy, so that to me reads that he, not so much that this was a steal, but that he was underscouted, right?
Could be. I mean, the top-down model had him at 23% NHL chance, 7% star chance. He was their 20th rated player overall. And again, that's why I've been reading out these numbers. You think of some of these other guys where it's like, okay, they're way down the board. And then someone like Samoskevich, who wasn't projected to really be a guaranteed first rounder, looks this promising compared to at least this one information source. And the reports are out there like tremendous skater and puck carrier. And it's another highly skilled prospect that the Panthers had. I mean, it's tough not to love this pick for basically every reason.
Let me read a sentence to you, right? And then you'll just say, oh, okay, that seems right. And that's not a hot take at all. So just if you were to read this sentence, you'd be like, oh, okay, that seems right. And that's Mackie Samoskevich elected to Hockey Hall of Fame. Hockey Hall of Fame member Mackie Samoskevich. That is what that name is. Right? That's a Hall of Fame name. That is just, he's going to have a statue. Mackie Samoskevich, picked by the Cats in 21. I don't know. I'm very happy about this pick. Billy Z, he's the new Stevie Y. It's 2 letters better if we're going left to right. And Bill Zito still has not screwed up. Good for him. In a world filled with Ron Francises, be a Bill Zito. So I don't know. The Cats continually year after year, they haven't picked in the top 10 in a very long time. And they seem to just get these really sleeper guys. And this seems to be another pick. And at 18 years old, this kid's 5'11", 191. So it's not like we need to wait for him to fill out. So what a pick.
Oh, goodness gracious. I just saw a fair point on Twitter. Why are NHL teams valuing Ristolainen higher than Reinhart? It's a good question. Pick number 20.
Never wrong.
Pick number 25, the Columbus Blue Jackets add another really promising piece. He was projected to go here. Corson Coolemans, defender, 82% chance to be an NHLer on the top-down model, 13% chance to be a star. He was the 14th rated player according to their model and the 4th best defenseman as an all-around defender. And again, you talk about they added Boqvist, they added Bean. You draft a guy like this. Again, I question the Atkinson trade that broke while we were in the middle of recording this show, but everything else, I really like what they've done in the past week.
So something that sticks out to me about this Coolemans pick, how often do you see a guy from the Alberta Junior Hockey League go in the first round? I can't ever recall a time that it happened before.
So to look up, in the first round is the real tough question. Let me see if I can find that source. Because it's funny, I have a list here of some of the names, and it's Colton Parayko. But he was a third round pick. Looks like Dylan Olsen, who went 28th overall to the Blackhawks in 2009. I don't know if he ever played an NHL game.
I believe he played an NHL game for the Florida Panthers.
You had Joel Colborne.
Yeah, he did. He played for the Panthers for 92 games.
Former Bruin Joe Colborne went 16th overall in 2008. And Brent Sutter, way back in 1980, 17th overall to the Islanders. So, yeah, there's a chance he was the 4th player in history. Don't quote me on that, but just the 4th player ever out of the AJHL to be drafted in the first round.
Well, if you go to the AJHL website, it's basically a monument to Corson Kuhlman's right now. So I'd imagine this is a big deal for them. So I don't know. I mean, this seems like maybe the owners of Columbus were right to let Jarmo Kekalainen fix his own mess before they fire him and let someone else take credit for it.
Shouldn't have traded Atkinson, damn it. So
we loved Cameron. He was there with us on Wing Night. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, for me, I'm surprised Kuhlman kind of fell this low because this is a very, I mean, aside from Owen Power and, you know, Brent Clark, Simon Edmondson, there's just not a lot. This is not a very D-heavy first round. And I thought for sure somebody would try and fill a need and take him significantly earlier.
Well, speaking of defenders, I guess, pick number 26, the Minnesota Wild took defender Carson Lambos, who was projected 19th. Top-down model, 29% chance to be an NHLer, 2% chance to be a star player, like a decent amount of depth across the board for the Wild, so why not go for someone who is projected higher? Again, top-down doesn't like him, but I think a pretty good pick there for Minnesota.
Yeah.
Certainly, like at this stage of the draft, you're entering like pure crapshoot territory.
Yeah,
if you weren't already
I agree,
there.
Especially this year, right? Because of the fog. So, I mean, he does have some injury concerns. He's got size at age 18. I mean, 6'1", 197. His skating, I've seen praised a lot, and his puck possession. So as long as he has the hockey IQ, right? Like you want smooth skating, you want puck possession, and then you can teach him how to play defense at the NHL level. If he has those talents, like you can't teach someone to skate at the NHL level if they aren't already close to it when they get drafted. Right. So I don't know. Yeah, I think this is a good pick for the Wild.
Pick number 27 to the Nashville Predators, center Zach Leroux, who was projected first round, 29th. Nashville traded picks number 40 and 51 to Carolina to get him, so a pretty good deal for both teams. 32% chance to be an NHLer, 9% chance to be a star. He was the 17th overall player and the 12th rated forward. Super, super gritty player. Despite, I think, anyone familiar with him on like NHL 21, he's listed as more of a skill guy, but he was suspended 4 times in one season. And again, along with that Russian player they picked up, defense first, and certainly more of a physical style. Like, this is a total Nashville pick, a total Bruins pick. I'm shocked that this guy, again, wasn't taken by Don Sweeney.
So when I was looking this prospect up, I saw something on Sports Blog Nation. There was like an article that described him as a bull in a china shop. So I've got to imagine future headline, Zachary Leheureux, or there's letters there.
Zachary, very French.
Zachary French to have in-person with Department of Player Safety.
It's going to happen.
That's my projection.
That's a good one.
Projects to meet with DPS.
There you go. Shout out to the San Jose Sharks, who just selected a goalie, 81st overall, Benjamin Goodrow, who was up there.
Benny Hockey.
Benny Hockey.
Benny Hockey.
They needed a goalie, for the love of God, so it's a good thing they actually got one. Built-in nickname, too.
Oh, God.
Pick number 28 overall, Colorado selected winger Oscar Olsson, who was projected 26th. Again, top-down model, 22% to be an NHLer, 3% star, 36th overall for them, 28th forward. Great skater, solid offensive option, and honestly, I mean, for the Jets, or excuse me, for the Avs, you kind of need depth everywhere. So, I mean, they kind of go for a decent outside chance with a Swedish player, which, as we've seen on the top-down model all throughout here, very hit or miss when it comes to European leagues this season.
Yeah, and I think that's just because we talked about this very briefly on the show, but your scouts couldn't go to Europe, you know?
Yeah.
So you're basically relying on some guy with like a phone and a cell service none of us have ever heard of. So he's probably there on like Spheriage Mobile, and he's trying to explain what... trying to explain like what's going on.
Get Schmoopel 5G.
That said, I mean, I know absolutely nothing about this guy. I'm not going to pretend I do. I know I've read blurbs that say he's got a hell of a shot, which means he's very strong as a defenseman or as a wing. Plays a 200-foot game. I like that. That said, my favorite thing about this prospect is he has the extremely rare double O alliteration.
There you go.
Also, shout out to the Calgary Flames, who picked Cole Huckins, 77th.
Who I effectively call Chuckins, thanks to NHL franchise mode. Pick number 29. Don't worry, everybody. We're getting to the controversy to finish up this particular episode. Number 29, the New Jersey Devils reach to select right winger Chase Stillman. Second to third round projection. Top down had him at a 2% chance to be an NHLer, a 1% chance to be a star, the 187th rated player, 127th out of forwards. Physical, strong forechecker. They needed some forward prospects. Corey Stillman being his dad probably helped. Deej, it's another one of those guys where it's like, okay, defense first option in the first round. It can work, but, you know, obviously it's not going to be the prettiest thing in the world when it comes to like projections of star power.
All right, so hear me out here. I haven't rated any of these picks before in any way whatsoever, but I'm going to rate this one. This gets a giant capital F. Why are you taking a power forward this far off the board when A2 Ratu is still available?
Yeah, when you put it that way, right?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, and you could have gotten both of them if you really wanted to.
You could have picked this guy on, you could have signed this guy next week, probably. Like, this is a very bizarre thing. And I think a lot of these picks are just, I'm going to keep saying this, it's just going to come off as very bizarre because, I mean, there was no consensus here because the scouting departments were all over the place, especially in Ottawa. So I don't know. I think this is just...
If there was ever going to be a draft that played out like this, it was going to be this one.
Oh, 100%. And then I think they submitted this pick, found out he wasn't related to Corey Stillman, kicked themselves in the foot, and called it a day.
Except he is.
He is?
Yeah, it's his son.
Oh, this is Riley Stillman's brother.
Yes.
Why aren't people mentioning that? Okay, so, all right, so I think that might make this a little bit better then, in that case. If your brother and your dad are both NHL players, you know what it takes, especially if you are ranked in the top 100. Like, you have the family support of people that understand the dedication, and I think that increases your chances of making the NHL. So maybe that's what the Devils saw.
But you could also be the Jared Stahl of the bunch.
Yeah, but this guy's name is Chase.
Pick number 30, the last of the few controversial picks we have to talk about here. Vegas selects center Zach Dean. Fringe first rounder, top down 5% NHL, 1% star, 81st rated player. Two-way center, Vegas needs a bit of help everywhere. Obviously, they've done some shuffling. You know, Cody Glass is gone, Nolan Patrick's in. So, I mean, hey, it's fine, right? This is one of those, we'll find out in 10 years if it was good or bad.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this pick is, so Greg Wyshynski is absolutely one of my favorite hockey writers because, I mean, he's been writing for a really long time and occasionally he uses combinations of words that just I don't know why, they just do it for me. But on the Zach Dean pick, Wyshynski said, his virtue is in the totality of his game. And there's just something about that statement that's like, okay, there's some gravity to this player. I don't know. I've heard him
huge.
He's huge. He's 6 foot 176. Yeah. I could take him. So I don't know. I think this is a very safe pick.
Child.
I think this is a very safe pick for a Golden Knights organization that, to be perfectly honest with you, Tougie, doesn't really value having prospects in any way whatsoever. They're essentially meal tickets.
Yeah. How can we use this guy to get someone who's ready now? We need to win, goddammit.
How can we trade this guy for James Van Riemsdyk and his brother? I don't know.
Pick number 31, we are going to skip for the moment, much like the Montreal Canadiens should have. We'll jump to number 32, which
was the first time anyone's talked about the 32nd pick.
Yes. And yeah, God. Pick number 32, the Chicago Blackhawks selected defender Nolan Allen, who was projected in the second or third round, maybe the reach of the draft so far. The trade for Chicago becomes Seth Jones, Allen, and a sixth next year for Sillinger, Boqvist, the 44th in this draft, and another first rounder. Fleecing by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Nolan Allen has a 1% chance, according to Top Down, to become an NHLer. A 0% chance to be a star. Deej, he was, according to the Top Down model, their 338th overall player, 113th amongst defenders. You needed a defensive prospect after moving on from Boqvist. I repeat, 338th on Top Down. He was selected 32nd.
So here's what I'll say about Nolan Allen. And this is not to say that the Hawks were necessarily correct here, but why I think they made this pick. So I think the modern NHL is all about skating. I think skating is the difference maker amongst all players in the modern NHL. Every single player in the NHL today has grown up in an era where they were looking up to Patrick Kane. Everybody has sick hands, especially compared to 15 years ago, right?
Fair.
Nolan Allen was considered in most of the articles I read to be the very best skater in the draft. Wyshynski said that he skates well enough that he could play in the NHL tomorrow. He's also considered a good defensive defenseman, where he can take care of business in his own end. So to me, the last time I saw a first round defenseman drafted that was considered the best skater in the draft was Mike Matheson. So Mike Matheson, the caveats to his drafting was that he needed to grow defensively. Apparently, Nolan Allen's very good in his own end. He's exceptional skater, and I don't know. I think this could end up being a steal of a very underscouted player because, I mean, there was nobody notable on Prince Albert, so there was no reason to go up, see a game, and be like, oh, look at this Nolan Allen guy. So my guess is Chicago saw something, and I know this is a reach, but I think this is going to end up being a justifiable reach because of his skating skill and the way the modern NHL is paced.
I don't put it past that. I think it's just interesting though. Like you always had that debate of could you have gotten this guy sooner? But if he's your guy, you go for it.
Yeah.
I will say, it's a shame that Nolan Allen's moment was overshadowed by Stan Bowman being a scumbag.
Agreed. Especially in a draft that featured very few players from the WHL. We saw Carson Lambos go. I don't know. So to me, before we get into like the nitty gritty, I think for me, one of the most interesting things looking back on this draft is going to be seeing the under-scouted leagues and how those players showed up. Because you look at like Dylan Guenther going 9th. He played for Edmonton in the WHL, and I'd imagine that he was only scouted so heavily because of Sebastian Cossa, who also played for Edmonton. So I don't know. So to me, I approached this draft from a level of what scouts were doing and how heavily scouted players were. And one of the reasons is I read an article on how Luke Hughes was likely the most over-scouted player in NHL history. And so that changed my perspective on how this draft was going to go, especially because I think scouting makes such a difference here. So I don't know. Before we get to the nitty-gritty, I'll just say that's why, to me, Nolan Allen is one of the most interesting picks in this draft, even though he's otherwise just a footnote in the first round. To me, I think he's worth watching because there's a lot of interesting gears at play here.
I think that's fair. Again, now to the less fun part. Again, I will say Stan Bowman, fuck off. Like, whatever the hell that was to be like, here I am going to make this pick surrounded by women. Like, whatever the hell that ploy was, like, please get out of my favorite sport. Like, you do not have a spot in this sport anymore, I hope, at least. Pick number 31. The Montreal Canadiens select defenseman Logan Mailloux. Fringe first round, probably second round projection pretty much everybody knows the story at this point. If you want, again, my kind of in-the-moment thoughts, the video's up on YouTube for when he was drafted. Mailloux himself, as we basically all know at this point, renounced himself from the draft, although players can't officially do that. It's more of a plea than anything official. Players still up for grabs. The story is basically, as we all know, he was over in Sweden playing in the third tier this past season. Consensual sex with someone, I think she was 18, maybe 17. I see different reports on the ages. Consensual sex with somebody, takes a picture without her knowledge, sends it to his friends to be like, I'm the fucking man. Which, whatever. Point is, broke the law. And obviously, I don't need to sit here and explain why that is an incredibly fucking scummy thing to do. It ends up paying a fine as a result. And he himself says, I need to take a step back. For anybody who's a part of that brigade that's trying to say, well, you weren't a kid once that made a dumb mistake, there is obviously a drastic difference and you're just being difficult. This kid himself knows he screws up. And whether or not it's just a good PR move or not, in the aftermath of what we saw last year with Mitch Miller, where we didn't know publicly what had happened before the draft. He gets drafted, and the Coyotes end up rescinding the pick. Because what the hell is the matter with you? Rewarding this kid. It's the same concept here, except whether or not he's genuine by it or whatever, he gets out ahead of it by saying, please don't draft me. I need to be able to show receipts next year. Let me redeem myself for the scummy thing that I did. And Greg Wyshynski mentioned, too, multiple NHL teams had indicated that they might pick Mailloux in the second round, despite him renouncing himself. Given that the Canadiens didn't pick again until number 63, I imagine that's why they took him 31. The Canadiens make this pick. And there's multiple layers to this. But, Deej, I think before I go on a mini rant myself, I think we can best sum this up by saying if you had to have a justification, a statement, ready to go on your website and on Twitter as to why you are sitting there saying, we are drafting this kid despite this, I think that shows that you, of course, put hockey and player skill above any sense of morality.
Yeah. It's weird, and it seems very poorly timed. So first, let me address this in a bottle real quick. So I think in the whole process of this, I think Mailloux only made one mistake, right? And that was his initial crime. Which he was charged for, punished to the full extent of the law, publicly shamed, apologized multiple times, said, give me a year so I can show my receipts.
Yes.
I think my issue with this situation is that, and I don't want to use the term robbed, but Logan Mailloux he could have shown receipts here. He could have, I think in a weird way, I don't want to say I just think, I think this could have been I think if we gave him a year to show receipts, it could have turned a very bad thing into a net positive.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
it's weird to say, and sorry to cut you off, it's unfair to him.
Yeah.
Obviously, by saying that, it is not discounting what he did to that girl.
No, but he's
it
just
is
never going to be able to show receipts.
He's not going to be able to escape this now. There was a chance that you could have at least shown the receipts. And you made the comparison before we started recording. Kyle Larson in NASCAR. Again, beginning of the pandemic last year, drops the N-word during a live stream, gets cut. He's gone from NASCAR. Not even shows the receipts. In that time afterwards, he goes and puts in the work to show, hey, I screwed up, I'm sorry. Charitable work, didn't ask for any cameras to be there, nothing. Works his way back in the NASCAR and is now just getting sponsorships back. The receipts
He's the best driver in the sport right now.
Exactly. The receipts were there. And that's proof that if you have talent like Logan Mailloux does, and there's something like this that happens, if you go through the proper channels and show those receipts and show that you've improved and show that you were just a dumb kid who made a mistake and that you are truly sorry, there is redemption for you. Montreal, in a lot of ways, just fucked up this kid's entire career, because this will always follow him now. That chance at a proper redemption is gone. Because, well, you did get drafted. You were a first-round pick. And Bob McKenzie said this on Twitter. Bob McKenzie, of all people, saying, final line of this statement, quote, "We are committed to raising awareness amongst our players about the repercussions of their actions on the lives of others." And McKenzie said, that will be met with scorn/disbelief because from a hockey perspective, he didn't face repercussions. He's a first-round pick. And it's true. So, obviously, it's wrong. This is wrong for a variety of reasons. Neither Deej or I are saying that Logan Mailloux does not deserve a chance to prove that this was a dumb kid being dumb and not realizing the magnitude of how screwed up that is. Really.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like, it's one of those things where like everyone makes mistakes. A lot of people don't necessarily make them that are this huge or this terrible, right? But like, if you think about like the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life, whoever you are, wherever you're listening to, if you think about it, like how rare is an opportunity to publicly show your receipts and move past that? And in a weird way, I don't like this narrative that like Mailloux was rewarded and doesn't have to do anything because he got like picked in the first round. In a lot of ways, I think psychologically, this is significantly worse for him. And I think the real issue is if we get beyond the player, just the sheer incompetence of the Montreal front office here, like especially given it, just like I think the incidents were very different. But
yes,
at the same time, it makes Bergevin seem incredibly tone deaf.
And I will say this as well. It's not solely on Marc Bergevin. A draft pick like this, a decision like this is organizational, not just one man. But Bergevin is the GM of this team. He is the face of organizational moves. At the end of the day, you're the one at that podium making that announcement. So to sum up that part, again, it's unfair to so many people. And it's just a shame because it's a black eye for hockey. And we talked about the Chicago Blackhawks stuff and how that's being handled. And for me, this is why I'm of the opinion of I have no trust whatsoever of anybody involved with that Blackhawks organization who says they didn't know. And it's because of Marc Bergevin in this move. Because you, plain as day, said, we don't care. We don't care about the morals of the situation. He is good at hockey. He helps our team. That's it. And that's all you care about. That's what you're paid to care about. But also it goes to show just how toxic hockey culture can be. How toxic culture in sports can be. It's not just a hockey issue. But when hockey is your favorite sport and it's a smaller sport, you'd like to think that maybe, just maybe, hockey could be a little bit better. But in particular, again, for me, I cannot help but view Marc Bergevin as a gigantic piece of shit. I'm sorry. Like, I get it. He wears funny colored suits. He's fucking jacked. He's very passionate. He's very good at his job. But I cannot help but view you as a gigantic piece of shit because, Deej, we talked about receipts for Logan Mailloux. And for him to show his improvement. We have receipts from Marc Bergevin about what a piece of shit he is. He was with Chicago in 2010. Claims he didn't know a damn thing. I am calling that a bold-faced lie. Prove me wrong. I'm calling that a lie. Because since then, if I'm not mistaken, there were negotiations about Slava Voinov. There were definitely negotiations about bringing in Tony DeAngelo. It is clear that, hey, it's your job, but hockey talent above everything else. Winning over everything. And it's fucking gross. And again, it is not a Bruins fan against a Habs fan thing. This is not about that level of tribalism. It didn't matter if it was Carolina, if it was Buffalo, if it was Calgary, if it was Boston, I'd be even more pissed. I swear to God, it's the same thing as to what I said when I criticized the Tampa Bay Lightning when they won the Stanley Cup and held a parade in the middle of a pandemic. I'd be more so pissed if it was my team, my favorite team that did it. I am still as disgusted, 15 hours later as I was last night, for a variety of reasons. But it is gross. It's just gross. And then for the Habs to come out today, there was a press conference with Mayu that was out there in terms of interviewing him and him taking questions, and it's gross. And I'm sorry. I want Marc Bergevin out of the sport, and I think they should have to be forced to rescind this draft pick, and that Mayu should be back in the draft next year. I'm sorry, but that's the way I view it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still want to see what happens with the Chicago investigation. I think there's a lot of chaos there. But obviously, with all that going on, it's a very tone draft pick, so I don't know.
It's just incredibly frustrating, obviously, to be in this situation as a sports fan, right? Like, you just want to be able to enjoy your favorite sport without feeling scummy about it, like I've said. And right now I can't do that, and it's incredibly frustrating. So, last night very quickly went from, wow, this draft took forever just for one goddamn round, to just, you feel dirty by the end of it. So I don't really have too much else to add. Again, my other thoughts were out there in that other video that I've put up on YouTube, but it's just gross, man. That's the only way I can phrase it. It's just not a good look for the sport at all.
Yeah.
So, Deej, with that, anything else to add, or have we come to the end of what has been a marathon episode here?
Well, it's now coming out that the first round pick for Sam Reinhart is lottery protected. So that's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I'm just,
I would like our show to be able to return to just being a fun hockey podcast at pretty much all times.
Exactly.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people keep standing in the way of that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess
we'll end it there. I feel like that's a good place to end it. It is on a bit of a down note. We have covered everything and anything and everything here. In this particular episode, it's one of our longest ones in a long time. I don't know if we hit 3 hours. It might be close. I can't tell because of the break that we had to take there due to my internet issues. Deej, I look forward to seeing what else we have to talk about come the beginning of next week.
Yeah, I mean, I figure once everybody has all their prospects together, maybe we'll be able to give some ratings. I know New Jersey has a failing grade, so we'll get there.
Free agency on Wednesday, so look forward to that. And probably next Friday will be our show recapping the first couple days of what could be a very, very crazy time.
Where will Derek Stepan end up? How many years will he get $3 million for?
Who is going to win the Derek Stepan sweepstakes?
Exactly. All right. So I think that does it for our first and partially second round draft coverage. Our massive amount of trades. The NHL has been shuffled. Feathers have been ruffled. We want answers. Whose Flamingo is it? See you next week.